Hey there, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I've put together a new collection of interesting stories, so whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or just listen in the background, this should be a good one. Feel free to let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, let's start with the first story. It is titled,
On my wedding day, my in-laws mocked my brother in front of 800 guests. They said, "That's not a man, that's gutter trash." My fiancé laughed loudly. I stood up and canceled the wedding. My brother looked at me and said, "Brother, I own their entire company." Their faces went pale. The fluorescent lights of County General Hospital flickered at 2 a.m. as Austin Perez hunched over his 10th cup of coffee. Medical charts spread across the nurse's station. 5 years of pre-med, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, all leading to this moment where he'd choose between saving a patient's leg or their life. He chose the leg. Took him 14 hours. But the construction worker would walk his daughter down the aisle someday. "Dr. Perez, you're insane," his attending said, clapping his shoulder. Insane and brilliant. Austin didn't do it for praise. He did it because someone had to care. His younger brother, Samuel, taught him that the kid who'd been born with a twisted spine, who'd endured 7 surgeries before age 12, who'd been written off by half the medical establishment. Austin had watched their mother work 3 jobs to afford treatments, watched his father's heart give out from the stress when Austin was 19. He'd switched from business school to medicine the next semester. Samuel needed someone who gave a damn, and if the system wouldn't provide it, Austin would become the system. Samuel had other plans. While Austin carved through medical textbooks, Samuel carved through financial markets. The kid had a mind like a calculator and patience like a saint. Started with $5,000 from their father's life insurance. Turned it into $50,000 by sophomore year of college. Then $500,000. By the time Austin was chief resident at 32, 28-year-old Samuel was quietly buying distressed assets and turning them profitable. He never talked about his wins, never flaunted his success. He still lived in their childhood neighborhood, still drove their father's old Camry, still wore discount suits. "Why do you live like you're broke?" Austin once asked. Samuel had smiled that quiet, knowing smile that made him seem decades older than he was. "Because I remember what broke actually feels like, and I never want to become the kind of person who forgets." Austin met Christina Becker at a hospital fundraiser. She was everything he thought he wanted. Beautiful, polished from a successful family. Her father, Brent, owned Becker Industrial Solutions, a mid-size manufacturing company that supplied parts to automotive plants across the Midwest. Her mother, Maureen, was on every charity board in the city. The kind of woman whose smile could grace magazine covers and whose judgment could ruin reputations. "You're a doctor," Christina had said. Her eyes lighting up. "That's incredible. My parents will love you." They didn't. 3 months into dating, Austin met the Beckers at their country club. Brent's handshake was crushing and calculating, his eyes measuring Austin's worth in real time. Maureen's greeting was warm until she asked where Austin grew up. The warmth evaporated when he mentioned the South Side. "How humble," Maureen said, the words sounding like an insult wrapped in velvet. But Christina insisted it didn't matter. "They'll warm up to you," she promised. "They're just protective." Austin wanted to believe her. He'd been alone for so long. His mother had passed from cancer 2 years ago, and Samuel was his only family. The idea of belonging somewhere, of being part of something larger than hospital shifts and empty apartments was intoxicating. So, he overlooked the small comments. The way Brent always forgot his name, calling him the doctor like a job title instead of a person. The way Maureen would talk about their family's lineage, tracing it back to some industrialists from the 1800s, while pointedly never asking about Austin's family. Samuel saw through it immediately. "They're users, Austin," he said over dinner at their favorite hole-in-the-wall Chinese restaurant. "I've seen their type. They want the status of a doctor's son-in-law without actually respecting the person. You haven't even met them." "I've done my research." Samuel pushed his glasses up. That meant he'd dug deep. Becker Industrial is in trouble. They lost their 2 biggest contracts last year. Their stock is down 40%. Maureen's trust fund is what's keeping them afloat, and that dries up when she turns 65 next year. So, they're going through a rough patch. That doesn't make them bad people. Samuel's jaw tightened. "Just be careful. I know you want a family, but family doesn't come from a wedding certificate. It comes from who stands beside you when everything goes to hell." Austin proposed 6 months later at the same country club where they'd first had dinner with her parents. Christina said yes before he finished the question. The Beckers threw an engagement party that cost more than Austin's annual salary, inviting 300 of their closest friends. Samuel came in his discount suit, bringing a bottle of wine that cost $30. Morin had looked at it like he brought boxed wine, then tucked it behind the bar where no one would see it. "Your brother is sweet," Christina said later. "But maybe for the wedding, we could set him up with a stylist. My parents are inviting some very important people." Austin should have ended it then. But he'd already sent invitations, already put deposits on venues, already imagined the life they'd build. So, he convinced himself it would get better after the wedding. Once the stress of planning was over, once they were actually family, the wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in June at the Riverside Estate, a sprawling venue with manicured gardens and a ballroom that could host 800 guests. Austin had wanted something smaller, more intimate, but Morin insisted. "The Becker name means something in this city," she'd said. "We have obligations." Samuel arrived early on the wedding day, looking uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. Austin was in the groom's suite, adjusting his bow tie for the 50th time when his brother knocked. "You okay?" Samuel asked, nervous, excited, terrified. Austin laughed. "All of it. It's not too late to back out." "Sam, I'm serious." Samuel's expression was grave. "I've been watching them, Austin. The way they treat you, the way they talk about our neighborhood, our family. Yesterday, I heard Morin tell someone, you were rough around the edges, but trainable, like you're a dog. She's just old-fashioned. She's cruel." And Christina laughs when her mother says things like that. "I've heard her." Austin felt his chest tighten. "You're being paranoid. I'm being observant. There's a difference." Samuel gripped his shoulder. "But if this is what you want, I'll stand beside you. Always. Just know you deserve better than people who make you feel like you have to earn basic respect." The ceremony was supposed to start at 4. By 3:30, 800 guests filled the ballroom. Business associates, distant relatives, society fixtures who attended because being seen at a Becker event mattered. Austin stood at the altar, scanning the crowd for familiar faces, and finding none. His med school friends were working shifts. His residency colleagues were scattered across the country. In this sea of strangers wearing designer labels and false smiles, only Samuel felt real. The processional began. Bridesmaids in champagne-colored gowns glided down the aisle, followed by Christina's maid of honor, her college roommate. Then the music swelled for Christina's entrance. She looked stunning in an off-WH gown that probably cost more than Austin's car, her face radiant behind the veil. But then something shifted in the crowd. A commotion near the back. Austin saw Samuel standing frozen as Brent Becker's voice cut through the music. "Move. You're blocking the aisle." Samuel was standing in the side row, not blocking anything. But Brent wanted him to sit further back apparently. Morin joined her husband, her voice pitched to Carrie. "Honestly, some people have no sense of decorum." Samuel tried to sidestep into his seat, but his foot caught on someone's purse strap. He stumbled, catching himself on the chair. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. The kind of laughter that's really mockery, wearing a polite mask. Brent's voice boomed across the ballroom. "Christ, can't even walk straight. What kind of trashy?" Morin cut him off, but her version was worse. "Darling, please don't make a scene." Then addressing the crowd like she was explaining an embarrassing relative. "That's the groom's brother. You know, they come from difficult circumstances." The laughter grew louder. 800 people watching Samuel. Brilliant. Kind Samuel who'd overcome more than anyone in this room could imagine being treated like a spectacle. Austin's hands clenched at his sides. But then Christina's voice joined in from the back of the ballroom, her laughter bright and sharp. "Oh my God, did you see that?" He literally just she dissolved into giggles, whispering with her bridesmaids. "That's not a man. That's gutter trash." The words hit Austin like a physical blow. He looked at Samuel, saw his brother's face, not embarrassed, not angry, but resigned like he'd expected this all along, like he'd been warning Austin about exactly this moment, and Austin had been too desperate for belonging to listen. The officiant cleared his throat, trying to restore order. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could," Austin walked away from the altar. The crowd fell silent as he strode down the aisle, every eye following him. He reached Samuel first, standing beside his brother in a gesture that needed no words. Then he turned to face the 800 guests, his voice steady and clear. "This wedding is cancelled," Morin gasped. "Austin, don't be cancelled." He repeated louder. "All of it. There will be no ceremony. You can leave." Christina pushed through her bridesmaid's veil. "SKW. Are you insane? We can't just watch me." Austin turned to her and he saw her clearly for the first time. Not the woman he'd convinced himself she was, but the woman she'd always been. "You laughed when your father humiliated my brother. You laughed. It was just a joke." "Austin, God, You're so sensitive about people I love. Yeah, I am. He looked at Brent and Morin. You wanted to marry your daughter to a doctor. Congratulations. You get nothing instead. Brent's face purpled. You ungrateful little. Do you have any idea what this wedding cost? Well, we've invested in you. Invested? Austin laughed bitter. You spent 6 months trying to sand down every rough edge that reminds you I'm not from your world. Well, guess what? I don't want to be from your world. My world has people in it worth respecting. He started to leave Samuel beside him when his brother spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried across the silent ballroom. Mr. Becker, Mrs. Becker. Samuel adjusted his glasses. I should probably mention something. You know that investment firm that bought controlling interest in Becker Industrial Solutions 3 months ago? The one that's been keeping your company solvent. Brent's expression shifted from rage to confusion. Titan Capital Holdings. What about them? Samuel's smile was small and dangerous. I am Titan Capital Holdings. I own 68% of your company. As of 3 months ago, I'm your boss. The silence that followed was absolute. Austin stared at his brother, seeing pieces click into place. The late night calls Samuel had been taking. The new office space he'd rented but never explained. The quiet confidence that had seemed to grow over the past year. Morin's face went white. That's not possible. You're nobody. I'm the son of a factory worker who died trying to give his family a better life, Samuel said softly. I'm the kid who spent his childhood in hospitals because his spine grew wrong. I'm the brother of the best man I know who just walked away from the woman he thought he loved because she couldn't extend basic human decency. And yes, I'm also the person who controls whether your family business survives the next board meeting. Brent lunged forward, but Austin stepped between them. The older man froze. Austin had 4 in and 30 pounds on him. And they both knew it. Walk away, Austin said quietly. While you still can. The ballroom erupted. Guests pulling out phones, Morin clutching her husband's arm, Christina screaming about contracts and lawyers, and Austin ruining everything. But Austin heard none of it. He looked at Samuel, his little brother, who'd been protecting him all along, and started to laugh. You bought their company 3 months ago. They were hemorrhaging money after losing those automotive contracts I mentioned. I offered them a lifeline and they took it without doing due diligence on who Titan Capital really was. You didn't tell me. I wanted to see if you'd walk away on your own first. If you'd choose me over them without knowing I had leverage. Samuel's eyes were bright. You did. You chose right. They walked out of the Riverside estate together, leaving 800 guests and one furious Becker family behind. Austin was still in his tuxedo. Samuel in his rented suit, and neither of them had ever felt more free. In the parking lot, Austin stopped. What happens now? Samuel pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like spreadsheets and legal documents. Now we go have dinner at Changin's like we always do. Tomorrow I have a board meeting at Becker Industrial. And next week, he looked up, his smile sharp. Next week, things get interesting. Austin had one more question. When you bought their company, was it about revenge or business? Both, Samuel admitted. I saw an opportunity. A failing company run by people too arrogant to adapt. I knew I could turn it profitable. But yeah, part of me wanted leverage insurance because I knew people like the Beckers. I knew eventually they'd show you who they really were. I just wanted to make sure when that happened, you'd have options. You've been planning this for months. I've been protecting you like you protected me our whole lives. Samuel's expression softened. You gave up business school to become a doctor because of me. You spent years fighting to give me the best possible life. You think I forgot that? You think I'd let some country club make you feel small? Austin pulled his brother into a hug. I'm sorry I didn't listen. You're not the first person to get blinded by wanting to belong somewhere, but you do belong somewhere with people who know your worth. And tomorrow, the Beckers are going to learn exactly what it costs to underestimate us. They drove to Chang and Samuel's old Camry, still wearing their formal wear, and ordered enough food for 5 people. Mrs. Shang, who'd known them since they were kids, took one look at Austin's tuxedo and Samuel's grin and brought out a bottle of rice wine. Bad wedding? She asked in broken English. Cancelled wedding, Austin corrected. Best decision I ever made. She poured them each a shot. Good. That girl I see her once when she pick you up. She look at my restaurant like it smell bad. You better without her. They drank to that. And as they ate beef chowing and talked about their next moves, Austin realized Samuel was right. Family wasn't about blood or wedding certificates or country club memberships. It was about who stood beside you when the world tried to break you down. And by that measure, Austin had always been rich beyond measure. His phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from Christina. 43 text messages ranging from apologetic to furious to desperate. He blocked the number and ordered more spring rolls. So Austin said, watching his brother navigate through financial reports on his tablet. Tell me about this board meeting next week. What exactly are we doing to them? Samuel's smile could have cut glass. We're teaching them a lesson about respect and humility and what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I'm listening. Good, because you're going to want to be there for this. Trust me, it's going to be spectacular. The next morning, Austin woke up in his apartment with a headache from rice wine and a clarity that felt almost spiritual. No wedding, no Christina, no more pretending to be someone he wasn't for people who'd never truly accept him. Just him and Samuel and whatever came next. His phone had been blowing up all night. He turned it off around midnight. But now, in the harsh light of day, he knew he'd have to face it eventually. He made coffee first, though. Strong black hospital grade. Then he turned on his phone, 67 missed calls, 123 text messages, 15 voicemails, most from Christina, but several from Morin, 3 from Brent, and oddly one from someone named Eddie Combs at the Riverside estate. He started with Eddie's voicemail. Dr. Perez, this is Eddie from events at Riverside. Look, I just wanted to say what you did yesterday was the gutsiest thing I've seen in 20 years of wedding coordination. Also, the Beckers are refusing to pay their bill. They're saying you canceled, so it's your responsibility. I'm not going to push it because honestly worth it to see Morin Becker's face, but officially we do need someone to settle the account. Give me a call. Austin almost laughed. The wedding had cost north of $200,000. He didn't have that kind of money lying around. Medical residents weren't exactly rolling in wealth. But before he could worry about it, a text came through from Samuel. Already handled the Riverside bill. Paid in full. Consider it a gift. You just saved yourself from a lifetime of misery. Also, board meeting moved to today. 3:00 p.m. Becker Industrial Solutions headquarters. You should come bring popcorn. Austin texted back. You paid $120 for a wedding that didn't happen. I paid $200K to permanently sever your ties to people who treated you like garbage. Best investment I ever made. See you at 3. Austin showed up to Becker Industrial Solutions at 2:45 p.m. wearing surgical scrubs. He'd come straight from a shift, not bothering to change. The receptionist, a young woman named Cassie Paul, looked at him with confusion. I'm here for the board meeting, Austin said. Are you Dr. Perez? She was clearly trying to place him from the wedding. The cancelled wedding. Yes. Her expression shifted to barely suppressed delight. Oh my God. Everyone's been talking about it. Morin came in this morning looking like she'd aged 10 years. Brent locked himself in his office and some guy showed up an hour ago and just took over the conference room like he owned the place. He does own the place. That's my brother. Cassie grinned. This is going to be so good. Conference room is on the 3rd floor. I'll buzz you up. The conference room was glass-walled, overlooking the factory floor below. Through the windows, Austin could see the manufacturing equipment sitting idle. Another bad sign for the company's health. Inside the room, Samuel sat at the head of a massive mahogany table. Looking perfectly comfortable in a suit that Austin now realized probably cost more than the entire wedding. 3 other people were already seated. 2 men in expensive suits who Austin didn't recognize and a woman with steel gray hair who looked like she ate corporate raiders for breakfast. Samuel stood when Austin entered. Everyone, this is my brother Austin. Austin, this is our legal team. Benjamin McIntosh, Corporate Law. Hector Schaefer, Contracts and Acquisitions. And Bonita Schwartz, who specializes in making sure everything we do is ironclad and irrefutable. Benjamin nodded. Heard about yesterday that took balls or common sense. Bonita added, I've dealt with the Beckers before. Morin once tried to sue a caterer because the salmon wasn't pink enough. These are not reasonable people. The door burst open. Brent Becker stormed in. Morin right behind him, both looking like they hadn't slept. Christina followed, her eyes red and swollen. Behind them came 2 more people. An older man in his 60s with a kind of tan that spoke of too much golf and not enough work and a younger guy, maybe 35, wearing a suit that screamed middle management trying too hard. What the hell is this? Brent demanded. You can't just call a board meeting without. I can actually, Samuel said calmly. I own 68% of voting shares. I can call a board meeting whenever I want. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss. I'm not sitting anywhere until you explain, Mr. Becker. Bonito's voice was pure ice. You will sit down or you will be escorted out of this building by security and permanently barred from the premises. Your choice, Prince sat. So did Morin, though she looked like she wanted to flip the table. Christina stood behind them, looking lost. Samuel pulled up a presentation on the large screen at the front of the room. Let's start with where we are. Becker Industrial Solutions is insolvent. You've been operating at a loss for 18 months. Your two largest contracts were lost due to consistent quality control issues and missed deadlines. Your workforce has declined from 230 employees to 147 because you've been doing rolling layoffs rather than addressing the core problems. And your personal spending, he clicked to the next slide, showing a breakdown of expenses, has continued at an unsustainable rate. Morin's face went red. You have no right to. I have every right. I own this company. But let's talk about why I bought it. Another click. 3 months ago, you received an offer from Titan Capital Holdings. We offered you a lifeline in Jet Capital. Take controlling interest, but leave you in operational control. You took the deal without asking questions because you were desperate. You assumed Titan was just another investment firm that would let you keep running things into the ground while we absorb the losses. Who are you really? The older man? Austin assumed he was also a board member, asked quietly. Samuel Perez, son of Thomas and Maria Perez. Thomas died of a heart attack at 46, working 80-hour weeks in a factory not unlike this one to pay for his son's medical bills. Maria died at 52. Cancer because she couldn't afford proper treatment until it was too late. I was that son, the one with medical bills. I spent my childhood watching people like you. He gestured to Brent and Morin. Treat people like my parents as disposable. So when I made my money, I decided to do something about it. This is blackmail. Brent said, I'm trying to save this company despite you. Let me be clear. Becker Industrial Solutions can survive. It has good infrastructure, skilled workers, and relationships with vendors. What it doesn't have is competent leadership. So, here's what's going to happen. Samuel clicked to the next slide. Effective immediately, Brent Becker is removed as CEO. Morin Becker is removed from the board of directors. You'll both retain a token percentage of non-voting shares, enough that you're not completely destitute, but not enough to interfere with actual business operations. You can't do this. Morin shrieked. I can and I am. Benjamin, show them the paperwork. Benjamin slid a thick folder across the table. Everything is legal and binding. You signed over control when you accepted Titan's investment. The terms were very clear. We'll sue. Brent threatened. We'll take you for everything. With what money? Hector asked pleasantly. Your personal assets are mortgaged to the hilt. Your wife's trust fund is nearly depleted and any lawsuit would require discovery, which means every questionable decision you've made in the last 5 years becomes public record, including the embezzlement. The room went quiet. What embezzlement? The younger board member asked nervously. Hector smiled. Turns out Mr. and Mrs. Becker have been quietly siphoning company funds into personal accounts. Nothing massive. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. Hidden expense reports, inflated vendor charges, fake consulting fees. Over 3 years, roughly $400,000. We have all the records. Christina gasped. Dad. Brent's face had gone from red to gray. We were going to pay it back. Were you? Samuel's voice was soft. Dangerous. Because according to these bank statements, you were using company money to fund your country club memberships, your daughter's wedding, your wife's shopping habits, and your own stock portfolio losses. You were stealing from a failing company, from the employees who depended on you. So, yes, Mr. Becker, we could prosecute, but we're not going to. Why not? Austin asked, genuinely curious. Because prosecution would hurt the company. It would scare off vendors, tank what's left of our reputation, and put 147 people out of work. The Beckers aren't worth that. Samuel turned back to Brent and Morin. Here's the deal. You sign over all remaining shares. You leave quietly. You never use the Becker name in connection with this company again. And in exchange, we don't prosecute. You get to keep your house, your cars, and whatever is left of Morin's trust fund. You walk away from this with something which is more than you deserve. And if we don't agree, Morin asked, her voice shaking. Then we prosecute. You go to prison for embezzlement and fraud, and you lose everything anyway. The only difference is which ending you prefer. Brent looked at his wife, then at his daughter, then back to Samuel. You did this because of yesterday. Because of what I said about my brother? That was just the trigger. I've been watching you for a year, Mr. Becker. I knew who you were long before yesterday. The wedding was just when you finally showed everyone else. Samuel leaned forward. You wanted to know what kind of man my brother is. He's the kind who walked away from a woman he loved because she laughed when you humiliated me. He's the kind who chose loyalty over comfort, family over status, and you mocked him. You tried to make him feel small so you could feel big. So yes, I'm taking your company, but I'm not doing it for revenge. I'm doing it because I can run it better than you ever did and because the people who work here deserve better than you. The older board member cleared his throat. I'm Ernest Crawford. I've been on this board for 15 years and I've watched the Beckers run this company into the ground. If you're serious about turning things around, Mr. Perez, you have my support. The younger member nodded. Brian Holland. Same. I'm honestly just relieved someone's finally doing something good, Samuel said. Because we start tomorrow. New management structure, new operational protocols, new everything. Ernest. Brian, you'll stay on the board if you want. We're going to need institutional knowledge. He slid a paper across to Brent. Sign here. Walk away. It's your only option. Brent stared at the paper for a long moment. Then, hands shaking, he signed. Morin did the same, tears streaming down her face. One more thing, Samuel said as they stood to leave. Stay away from my brother. If I hear that any of you have contacted him, harassed him, or spread rumors about him, the embezzlement charges come back. Are we clear? They nodded. Christina tried to meet Austin's eyes, but he looked away. There was nothing left to say to her. After they left, the room exhaled collectively. Jesus, Brian muttered. That was intense. That was necessary, Samuel corrected. Ernest. Brian, I want you both to meet with me tomorrow morning. We're going to rebuild this company, but we're doing it right. Fair wages, good conditions, transparent accounting. I want the people who work here to actually want to work here. Ernest smiled. Your father would be proud of you. Samuel's expression softened. I hope so, Austin. Can you stay for a minute? After everyone else filed out, Samuel collapsed into his chair. I've been planning that for 3 months, and I was still terrified it would go wrong. It was perfect, Austin said. Brutal, but perfect. I didn't want to be brutal. I wanted to be fair. They stole from their own company, from their own employees. They deserved worse. He looked at Austin. Are you okay? I know this is a lot. I'm better than okay. I'm free and I'm watching my little brother take down the people who tried to make us feel worthless. It's the best I've felt in months. Samuel grinned. Good, because I have another surprise. I want you to join the board. What? Sam, I don't know anything about about integrity. You know about putting people first and you know about fighting for what's right even when it costs you everything. That's exactly what this company needs. He pulled out another folder. I'm creating an employee welfare program. Health coverage, profit sharing, education, assistance. I want you to oversee it. You're a doctor. You understand healthcare better than anyone else in this building. And you're my brother, which means I trust you more than anyone else in this building. Will you do it? Austin looked at the folder, then at Samuel. You really turned their company into something good. I'm going to try with your help. Samuel extended his hand. Partners? Austin shook it. Partners, but I'm keeping my residency. I'm not giving up medicine. I wouldn't ask you to. We'll work around your schedule. The board meets once a month and you can review the health programs whenever you have time. I just want you here helping me make sure we do this right. They left the office together as the sun set over the factory floor. Through the windows, Austin could see the manufacturing equipment still idle. But tomorrow, it would run again. Tomorrow under new management with new priorities. Tomorrow was a fresh start. His phone buzzed. A text from Eddie at Riverside Estate. Heard through the grapevine what happened at the board meeting. You and your brother are legends. Also, if you ever actually want to have a wedding worth celebrating, call me. I'll give you the family discount. Austin showed it to Samuel, who laughed. Getting ahead of yourself, aren't you? You just got out of one engagement. Yeah, but someday when I find someone who treats you like family instead of trash. Someone who earns it. Deal. And when you do, I'll pay for that wedding, too. But this time, it'll actually happen. They drove home in companionable silence. And for the first time in months, Austin felt like himself again. Not the person he'd been trying to become for the Beckers. Not the doctor who worked endless shifts to avoid going home to an empty apartment. Just Austin, brother, son, survivor, and tomorrow, board member of a company that his little brother had saved from destruction. Life was weird sometimes, but looking at Samuel, seeing the quiet pride on his face, Austin thought maybe weird was exactly what they needed. 6 weeks later, Austin stood in the Becker Industrial Solutions parking lot at 6 a.m. watching the morning shift arrive. He'd been working with Samuel and the new management team to implement changes. And today was the big test, the launch of the new employee welfare program. Inside the factory, Samuel had assembled the entire workforce in the main hall. 147 people, many of whom had been with the company for decades, all looking nervous. Under the Beckers, town halls meant layoffs and bad news. "Thank you all for coming," Samuel began. "I know the last few months have been uncertain. New ownership, new management. You didn't sign up for any of this, so I want to be transparent about where we are and where we're going." He pulled up a slide showing the company's financial status. 6 weeks ago, this company was 3 months from bankruptcy. The previous leadership had been operating at a loss, cutting corners, and burning through capital. You all knew things were bad. What you didn't know was how bad. A murmur ran through the crowd. Austin saw fear on their faces. These were people with mortgages, families, lives built around this job. "But here's the good news," Samuel continued. "We're turning it around. We've renegotiated contracts with our vendors, brought in new clients, and streamlined operations. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're profitable again. And because we're profitable, I want to invest in the people who made that possible." He nodded to Austin, who stood up. "Many of you don't know me. I'm Austin Perez, Samuel's brother. I'm a doctor and I'm also now on the board of directors. We've created something called the Becker Industrial Benefits Program. Terrible name. We're workshopping it, but it's designed to actually take care of you." He clicked to the next slide. "Effective immediately. Full health coverage for all employees and their families. No co-pays, no deductibles for preventive care. We've partnered with County General and 3 other hospitals to provide comprehensive coverage. If you're sick, you get treated. Period." The room was silent. People processing what they just heard. Second, profit sharing. This company does well, you do well. Every quarter, 10% of net profits gets distributed among all employees based on seniority and performance. Third, education assistance. You want to get your GED? We'll pay for it. You want to go to trade school? We'll pay for it. You want your kids to go to college? We have scholarship programs. A woman in her 50s raised her hand. "Is this real?" "Because the Beckers used to promise things and then it's real," Samuel said. "And it's legally binding. Austin's reviewed every contract personally. We're not making promises we can't keep. This is happening." The silence broke into applause. Then questions rapid fire. "How does the health coverage work? When does it start? What about dental vision?" Austin fielded them all, using his medical knowledge to explain exactly what was covered and how. By the end of the meeting, people were smiling, some crying. A man named Clyde Murray, who'd been with the company for 23 years, approached Austin afterward. "My daughter has diabetes." He said quietly, "We've been rationing her insulin because our old insurance was garbage and we couldn't afford full doses. You're saying that's covered now? All of it? Insulin, test strips, doctor visits, everything. Send me her information and I'll personally make sure she's set up with the best endocrinologist in the city." Clyde's eyes welled up. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep making excellent parts. That's all we ask." Word spread fast. Within a week, Becker Industrial Solutions had applications from skilled workers at other companies. People wanted to work somewhere that treated them like humans instead of expenses. Samuel was able to hire back 20 of the people the Beckers had laid off, expanding operations into a secondary product line that had been neglected for years. The factory floor hummed with energy Austin had never seen. Morale was up, quality was up, and production timelines were improving. It turned out that when you treated people well, they performed better. Revolutionary concept, but not everyone was happy about it. 8 weeks after the board meeting, Austin got a call from Benjamin McIntosh. "We have a problem. Brent Becker is talking to competitors, trying to sabotage our vendor relationships. He's telling people that Titan Capital is unstable, that we're going to fold, that they shouldn't sign contracts with us. Can we stop him?" Austin asked. "Legally, not unless he says something defamatory that we can prove. But he's being careful, staying just inside the bounds of protected speech. He's also been posting on business forms under fake names, spreading rumors." Samuel on speakerphone swore quietly. "I should have seen this coming. He's bitter and he has nothing to lose. What's our play? We outperform him." Austin said, "We let our results speak for themselves. Any vendor who listens to Brent's nonsense over our actual track record isn't someone we want to work with anyway." "That's the high road," Samuel said. "I'm not sure I want to take the high road anymore." "Then take the smart road." Bonita interjected. She joined the call. "Brent is making himself look desperate. Every time he badmouths us and we keep succeeding, he looks worse. Let him dig his own grave." They followed Bonito's advice and she was right within a month. Brent's attempts at sabotage had backfired spectacularly. Vendors saw his desperation and started avoiding him. His reputation in the business community tanked. Meanwhile, Becker Industrial Solutions landed a major contract with a national automotive manufacturer, a deal that guaranteed stability for the next 3 years. The local business journal ran a story from crisis to comeback, how new leadership saved Becker Industrial. The article praised Samuel's turnaround strategy and highlighted the employee welfare program. It didn't mention the Beckers by name, but the omission was damning. They'd been erased from their own company's success story. Morin took it the hardest. She'd built her identity around being a Becker, around the social status that name carried. Now, that name meant nothing, and she had no idea who she was without it. She started calling Austin, leaving rambling voicemails that ranged from apologetic to accusatory. "Please just talk to me." One message said, "We made mistakes, but we're family, or we were supposed to be. Don't you believe in forgiveness?" Austin deleted them without responding. Samuel had been right. Forgiveness didn't mean allowing toxic people back into your life. It meant letting go of anger, not letting them hurt you again. But Christina was different. 3 months after the cancelled wedding, she showed up at the hospital at 2 a.m. looking exhausted and desperate. "I need to talk to you," she said when Austin emerged from a trauma surgery. "I'm working and we don't have anything to say to each other. Please, just 5 minutes." Her eyes were red-rimmed. "I know I don't deserve it, but please." Against his better judgment, Austin led her to the doctor's lounge. 5 minutes. "I'm sorry," she began. "I know that's not enough, but I am. What I said at the wedding, laughing when my father I was wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things. You humiliated my brother, the person I care about most in the world, and you laughed. I know. I was trying to fit in with my parents' expectations and I lost myself. I lost us." She looked at him pleadingly. "I've been in therapy working on things, trying to understand why I did what I did. And I realize now that I was so focused on pleasing my parents that I never asked what I actually wanted. And what do you want, Christina? I want to make this right. I want another chance. I want no." Austin's voice was firm but not angry. "You don't want me. You want the idea of me. You want to fix your guilt to prove you're a better person than you were. But that's not my job. I'm not your redemption arc. Austin, I watched you become someone cruel because it was easier than standing up to your parents. And maybe you're working on that now, and that's good. But it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change that when it mattered, you chose them over basic human decency." Tears streamed down her face. "I made a mistake. You made a choice. And I made mine. I chose my brother, my integrity, my self-respect, and I'd make that choice again every single time." He stood up. "I hope you figure yourself out, Christina. I hope therapy helps, but I'm not going to be part of that journey. Find someone else to prove you've changed. I'm done." He walked away. And for the first time since the wedding, he didn't look back. 6 months after the cancelled wedding, Becker Industrial Solutions was thriving. The factory was running at full capacity. They'd hired 50 new employees and profits were up 37%. Samuel had been featured in Forbes as one of 30 under 30 to watch in the manufacturing sector. Austin's employee wellness program had become a model that other companies were trying to replicate. They celebrated at Chang's. Naturally, Mrs. Chang brought out her special dumplings, the one she only made for family, and refused to let them pay. "You boys make me proud," she said, patting both their heads like they were still kids. "Your mama and papa. They watch from heaven. They see what you do. They proud, too." Austin raised his beer. "To Dad, who taught us that work means something. And to Mom, who taught us that people mean everything. To family," Samuel added. "The one we're born with and the one we choose." They drank to that. And as they ate dumplings and planned the next phase of the company's growth, Austin's phone buzzed. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Dr. Perez, this is Ernest Crawford from the board. I'm calling with some news you want to hear. Brent Becker just filed for bankruptcy. His personal bankruptcy, not business. Apparently, he's been gambling, trying to make back what he lost. Didn't work out. He's lost everything. In the house, the cars, all of it." Austin felt a complex mix of emotions. Not satisfaction exactly. Not quite sadness either, just a kind of resigned acknowledgement that consequences were real. "What about Morin and Christina?" he asked. "Morin's moved in with her sister in Connecticut. Christina is apparently working retail somewhere, living in a studio apartment. She's cut ties with both parents from what I hear, trying to start over." After he hung up, Samuel asked, "Bad news?" "Depends on your perspective. The Beckers lost everything." "For real this time?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. "You feel bad about it?" "A little, maybe. I don't know." Austin pushed his beer around the table. They made their choices. We made ours, but it's still sad, to watch people destroy themselves. They had every opportunity to do better. We gave them an out. They could have walked away with something, but Brent kept gambling, kept making bad decisions. At some point, that's on him. Yeah. Austin looked at his brother. You know what though? I'm glad we didn't destroy them. I'm glad we just removed them from power and let them destroy themselves. Because if we crushed them directly, I'd feel worse. This way, they had agency. They had choices. They made bad ones. That's because you're a better person than they deserve, Samuel said. But I'm glad too. Revenge is supposed to feel good. But I think this feels better knowing we built something good instead of just tearing something down. Speaking of building something, Austin said, pulling out a folder he'd been carrying. I have an idea. What if we expand the employee wellness program, not just here, but partner with other companies, consult with them on building similar programs? We could create a whole new standard for how manufacturing treats workers. Samuel's eyes lit up. A consulting division. We'd be helping more people, spreading the model, and making money while we do it. Win-win. I love it. Let's build a proposal for the board next month. They spent the rest of the night sketching out plans, dreaming bigger. And when Austin finally got home at midnight, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pure, uncomplicated hope. 1 year after the canceled wedding, Austin was asked to give a talk at a medical conference about integrating healthcare into workplace wellness programs. He almost said no, public speaking wasn't his thing, but Samuel convinced him. You've helped transform an entire company. People need to hear how you did it. Besides, you're great at explaining complex things. You're a teacher at heart. So Austin found himself on a stage in Chicago looking out at 300 healthcare administrators and HR professionals, feeling his heart pound in his chest. He started with the story of the canceled wedding. A year ago, I was standing at an altar about to marry someone I thought I loved. And my future in-laws humiliated my brother in front of 800 people. Called him trash, laughed at him, and my fiancé joined in. He paused. I canceled the wedding. Best decision I ever made. He had their attention now. But this isn't a story about a wedding. It's a story about values. See, my brother, who'd been mocked and dismissed, turned out to own my in-laws' company. And when he took control, he didn't destroy it. He saved it by implementing programs that valued employees as humans instead of expenses. And it worked. The company went from near bankruptcy to record profits in under a year. He clicked to his first slide, showing the data. Healthcare costs down, productivity up, employee retention through the roof, quality control metrics better than ever. Here's what we learned. Taking care of people isn't charity. It's good business. When workers don't have to choose between seeing a doctor and paying rent, they perform better. When they know their families are protected, they're more loyal, more engaged, more innovative. It's not complicated. Treat people well and they'll deliver excellence. The talk went viral. Within a week, Austin had fielded calls from 50 companies wanting to know more. Samuel's consulting division launched with more business than they could handle. They had to hire a full team just to manage the demand. And through it all, Austin kept working as a doctor. He couldn't give it up. Medicine was part of who he was. But now he had balance. Purpose in both worlds. Helping individual patients and helping entire workforces. Samuel teased him about becoming a celebrity. You're like the Dr. Oz of workplace wellness, except actually helpful. Please never compare me to Dr. Oz again. They were in Samuel's office, a real office now, not the cramped space he'd started in reviewing expansion plans. Becker Industrial Solutions was branching into new markets, acquiring 2 more struggling manufacturing companies to turn around. The model was proven. The formula worked. You ever think about Dad? Austin asked suddenly about what he'd think of all this. Samuel set down his pen. Every day, I think he'd be amazed. Proud definitely. Maybe a little overwhelmed by how big it's gotten. But mostly, I think he'd be happy that we're doing it right, that we're not just making money, we're making a difference. And Mom, she'd cry, happy tears. Then she'd make us her Ras Khan polo and tell us not to get big heads. Samuel smiled. They gave us everything they had. The least we can do is make sure other families don't have to sacrifice like they did. Austin's phone rang. The hospital. Perez here. Dr. Perez. We have a patient in the ER construction accident. Multiple injuries. Patient specifically asked for you. Says you saved his leg 5 years ago. Wants you to save his life now. Austin was already grabbing his keys. On my way. He paused at the door, looking back at Samuel. Dinner tomorrow, Chang's always. Austin rushed to the hospital. His mind already shifting into doctor mode. The business side of his life faded and the medical side emerged because this was who he was. Someone who saved lives, who fought for people, who never gave up, just like his brother, just like his parents had taught them. And as he scrubbed in for surgery, Austin realized something. A year ago, he thought he needed the Becker's approval to be complete, to be worth something. But he'd always been worth something. He'd always been enough. Canceling that wedding had been the beginning, not the end. And everything that came after the company turned around, the wellness programs, the consulting business, all of it was just proof that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away from people who don't see your value. Because somewhere out there, someone will. And when they do, you'll be ready for them. 18 months after the canceled wedding, Austin met someone. Her name was Tanya House, and she was a social worker at County General. He'd seen her around for months. She was the one who fought with insurance companies to get patients the care they needed, who found housing for homeless patients being discharged, who somehow made miracles happen with no resources and endless determination. They met officially when they both arrived at 6 a.m. to check on the same patient, a teenager who'd been in a car accident and had no family. Austin was handling the medical side. Tanya was handling everything else. "You're Dr. Perez," she said, shaking his hand. "I've heard about you, the surgeon who operates on hope and stubbornness." "You're the social worker who makes the impossible happen," he replied. "We should collaborate more often." They did. And somewhere between patient consultations and rush cafeteria coffees, Austin realized he was looking forward to seeing her every day. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was good, genuinely thoroughly good in a way that didn't require fanfare or recognition. When he finally asked her out 3 months later, she laughed. "I was wondering when you get around to it. I've been dropping hints for weeks. I'm a little gun-shy after my last relationship imploded spectacularly. I heard about that. Everyone has. You're kind of a legend around here. The guy who canceled his wedding because his fiancée was terrible to his brother. Most romantic thing I've ever heard." "That's romantic." "Hell yes. You chose love and loyalty over social pressure and convenience. You walked away from someone who didn't deserve you. That's not just romantic, it's heroic." Their first date was at Chang's. Mrs. Chang took one look at Tanya and beamed. "You bring nice girl. Smart girl, good girl." She turned to Tanya. "You keep him. He good man. Heart of gold. I can tell." Tanya said warmly. Samuel showed up halfway through dinner. Austin suspected Mrs. Chang had called him. He slid into the booth, extending his hand to Tanya. "I'm the brother, the one from the wedding story. I've heard so much about you. Austin talks about you constantly. Good things, I hope. The best things. He says you're the smartest person he knows and the only one he completely trusts." Samuel glanced at Austin. Something warm passing between them. "He's not wrong, but I'm also incredibly annoying and I'm going to third wheel this date to make sure you're good enough for him." Samuel Austin started. "It's okay." Tanya interrupted laughing. "I'd be suspicious if you didn't vet me. My sister did the same thing when I started dating my ex." They spent 2 hours talking about work, family, dreams, failures. Tanya shared that she'd grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until she aged out at 18. That's why she became a social worker, to be the advocate she'd never had. "I get it," Samuel said quietly. "The system failed you, so you became the system you needed. Austin did the same thing. The medical establishment failed our family. So, he became the doctor who doesn't fail people." "And you?" Tanya asked. "I became someone who makes sure workers aren't treated like my father was. We all have our origin stories. The question is what we do with them." By the end of the night, Samuel gave Austin a subtle thumbs up. Tanya had passed the test. Over the next 6 months, Austin and Tanya built something real, something based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. When he introduced her to the Becker industrial team, she fit in immediately, offering suggestions for expanding the wellness program to include mental health services and child care assistance. "She's perfect for you," Samuel said after one board meeting where Tanya had presented her ideas. "She gets it. She gets us. I know it's terrifying." "Why terrifying?" "Because I screwed up so badly last time. What if I'm wrong again?" Samuel shook his head. "You weren't wrong about Christina. You saw what you wanted to see because you were lonely, but you're not lonely anymore. You're happy and you're choosing Tanya with clear eyes, not desperate ones. That's the difference." Austin proposed at Chang's naturally. Mrs. Chang cried. Samuel recorded the whole thing on his phone, grinning like an idiot. Tanya said yes before Austin finished asking, pulling him into a kiss that tasted like hot and sour soup and happiness. "One condition," she said. "Your brother has to be your best man." Obviously, who else would I ask? And we're not inviting 800 people. We're inviting about 30. The people who actually matter. Perfect. Then yes. 1,000 times. Yes. They got married 6 months later at a small ceremony at a botanical garden. 30 guests, doctors and nurses from the hospital, workers from the factory, Mrs. Chang and her family, Samuel and his girlfriend Eva Carey, who he'd been secretly dating for months and finally admitted to, and Tanya's foster sister, who'd flown in from Seattle. Ernest Crawford, who'd become a mentor to both Austin and Samuel, officiated. His speech was short and perfect. Marriage is about choosing someone every day, not just on the wedding day, but every morning after. It's about standing beside them when the world tries to push you apart. Austin and Tanya already know this. They've both fought too hard and survived too much to take love for granted. So, this isn't just a wedding. It's a promise to keep choosing each other, to keep fighting for each other, to keep building something beautiful together. When Austin kissed his bride, Samuel Wolf whistled and the whole garden erupted in laughter and applause. At the reception, Austin found a quiet moment with his brother. "Thank you," Austin said. "For everything, for saving the company, for having my back, for not letting me marry the wrong person." "You would have figured it out eventually," Samuel replied. "You're too good to stay with someone who diminishes you, but I'm glad I could speed up the timeline. Still, I owe you. You don't owe me anything. You've been saving my life since we were kids. This is just me returning the favor." They stood there, two brothers who'd survived poverty and loss, and people who tried to make them feel small and watched the people they loved celebrate love itself. Dad would have loved this. Austin said he would have cried through the whole ceremony. Mom, too, they're here though. I feel them. Me, too. The reception went late into the night. No country club pretension. No judgmental stares. No one keeping score of who was important enough to attend. Just people who genuinely cared, celebrating two people who'd found each other against all odds. And when Austin and Tanya left for their honeymoon a week in Costa Rica, nothing fancy, just beaches and quiet, Samuel handed them an envelope. "Don't open until you land." On the plane, they opened it together. Inside was a deed to a house, a beautiful craftsman in a good neighborhood with a yard and enough space for the family they'd talked about starting someday. "He bought us a house," Tanya whispered, stunned. Austin wasn't surprised. That was Samuel. Quiet, thoughtful, always 10 steps ahead. The note inside said simply, "Every family needs a home. Love, Sam." Austin called him as soon as they landed. "You bought us a house. I bought you a wedding gift. There's a difference. Samuel, you gave up everything for me once. Let me do this for you, please." Austin's throat tightened. "Thank you for everything. Just be happy, Austin. That's all the thanks I need." 2 years after the canceled wedding, Austin and Tanya's house was full of life. They'd adopted a dog, a 3-legged rescue named Lucy, who'd been abandoned at a shelter. They were talking about kids, about the future, about all the possibilities that lay ahead. Becker Industrial Solutions had grown into a regional powerhouse, a model for ethical manufacturing. Samuel had acquired 4 more companies, implementing the same transformation at each one. The consulting business had expanded internationally. They'd literally changed industry standards. And through it all, Austin kept being a doctor, kept saving lives, kept fighting for patients who needed someone in their corner. One evening, Austin came home from a particularly brutal shift to find Tanya in the kitchen cooking dinner and humming along to music. Lucy was curled up on the couch. The house smelled like garlic and tomatoes and home. "Bad day?" Tanya asked, reading his expression. "Lost a patient. 8-year-old leukemia. We tried everything." She pulled him into a hug, letting him feel it. "I'm sorry." They stood there for a while. Lucy eventually padding over to lean against Austin's legs. This was what healing looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic victories, but quiet moments with people who loved you through the hard parts. Samuel called. Tanya said eventually he wants us to come to the office tomorrow. Says he has news. The next day they gathered in Samuel's office. Austin, Tanya, Eva, and the core leadership team. Samuel looked nervous, which was unusual. So he began, "I've been thinking about expansion. We've proven the model works. We've changed how manufacturing treats workers, but I want to go bigger." He pulled up a presentation. "I want to create a foundation. The Thomas and Maria Perez Foundation for Worker Welfare. We'll fund research into workplace health, provide grants to companies wanting to implement better programs, and offer direct support to workers in crisis. Healthcare, education, emergency funds, all of it." Austin felt his eyes burn. "You're naming it after Mom and Dad. They started this. Their sacrifice, their struggle. It's why we do what we do. I want their names attached to something that helps people like them. People who work themselves to death trying to provide for their families. How much are you putting in? Austin asked. 20 million to start. But I want you to run it. You understand healthcare. You understand workers. You understand the mission. Will you do it? Austin looked at Tanya, who was crying. Then at Samuel, his little brother who'd grown into the most remarkable person Austin knew. On one condition, you let me put in 5 million. Half the money I've saved, invested, built up over the years. This is our legacy. Both of us equal partners. Samuel's eyes widened. Austin, I'm serious. We do this together or not at all. Samuel walked around the desk and pulled Austin into a fierce hug. Together, then always together. The Thomas and Maria Perez Foundation launched 3 months later with a gala that was actually meaningful, not socialites pretending to care, but actual workers, actual families whose lives had been changed by the programs they'd implemented. Clyde Murray spoke about how his daughter's diabetes care had saved her life. A woman named Laura Johnson talked about how the education assistants had let her get her nursing degree. A man named Pedro Graham shared how the emergency fund had kept his family housed when he'd been injured on the job. These aren't just programs, Pedro said, his voice breaking. This is proof that someone gives a damn about people like us, that we matter, that our lives have value. When Austin took the stage to speak, he looked out at a room full of faces. People who'd been invisible to the Beckers, to people like the Beckers, to a system that treated workers as expendable. 2 years ago, I was supposed to get married, he began. And my soon-to-be in-laws humiliated my brother in front of 800 people. They called him trash. They treated us like we were less than human because we came from nothing. And I walked away from that wedding, from that family, from that life. He paused. Best decision I ever made because it led me here to this work, to these people, to understanding that wealth isn't measured in country club memberships or social status. It's measured in the lives you touch, the people you help, the changes you make. My parents died too young, broken by a system that didn't value them. But they taught us, my brother and me, that every person has dignity. Every person deserves respect. Every person matters. And this foundation is how we honor that lesson by making sure other families don't have to sacrifice what ours did. The applause was thunderous. And as Austin left the stage, Samuel caught his arm. They'd be so proud of us. Samuel said, I know. I feel them every day. And he did. In every decision, every program, every life changed for the better. Austin felt his parents' influence. Their sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Their struggle had meaning. Their legacy lived on in ways they never could have imagined. That night at home with Tanya and Lucy, Austin's phone buzzed, an unknown number. He answered cautiously. Dr. Perez, a woman's voice, hesitant. This is Christina. Christina Becker, I know I probably shouldn't call, but I wanted you to know I saw your speech tonight online and I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. You deserve so much better than how my family treated you, than how I treated you. And I'm so happy you found it. Austin was quiet for a moment. Thank you for saying that. I hope you're doing well. I am. I'm working as a teacher now. Elementary school. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And I'm in therapy, actually working on myself instead of just talking about it. I'll never forgive myself for what I did, but I'm trying to be better. That's all anyone can do. Be better than they were yesterday. Your brother, is he happy? Incredibly. He's with someone who sees his worth. They're building a life together. Good. That's good. She paused. I won't bother you again. I just wanted you to know that what you're doing, the foundation, all of it, it matters. You're changing lives. And I'm grateful I got to witness even a small part of your journey. Even if I was on the wrong side of it. After she hung up, Tanya asked, You okay? Yeah, that was closure. Real closure. She's not the villain anymore. Just someone who made bad choices and is trying to do better. I can let that be enough. That's growth. That's us. We choose growth over bitterness. Progress over revenge. Love over hate. Very wise, Dr. Perez. I learned from the best. They curled up on the couch together, Lucy between them, and watched mindless TV. And in that simple, perfect moment, Austin realized something profound. He'd won. Not by destroying the beggars, not by crushing his enemies, but by building something so beautiful, so meaningful that their small-minded cruelty became irrelevant. By choosing love and purpose over anger and revenge, that was the victory. Not their downfall, but his rise. Not their punishment, but his peace. And as he drifted off to sleep, Tanya's head on his shoulder. Samuel's text lighting up his phone. Foundation raised $2. Tonight, we're going to change so many lives. Austin smiled. This was what winning looked like. This was what happiness felt like. This was home.
And that concludes this story. That was a pretty wild one if you ask me. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Now, let's get right into the next story. It's titled,
At my wife's office branch opening party, her boss mocked me in front of everyone, not knowing I own the company. You know that feeling when your spouse says, "Oh, it's just a small office thing. You don't have to come." And every single alarm bell in your head starts ringing like you're in a 5-alarm fire drill. Yeah, that was my first red flag. And let me tell you, I've got a PhD in reading between the lines when it comes to my wife's tone. Tessa, my beautiful, ambitious, occasionally too honest for her own good wife, had been acting weird for about 3 weeks now. And not the fun kind of weird where she suddenly decides we should learn salsa dancing or adopt a rescue guinea pig. No, this was corporate weird. The kind that makes you wonder if she's been replaced by a motivational speaker who exclusively communicates in LinkedIn buzzwords. Suddenly, everything coming out of her mouth was brand image, branch performance, and my personal favorite, team culture, which is just corporate speak for we're all pretending to like each other while secretly competing for the same promotion. She'd come home from work looking exhausted but weirdly energized, like she'd just finished running a marathon through a motivational poster factory. Her laptop was always open, her phone was always buzzing, and whenever I asked what was going on, she'd wave me off with some vague explanation about quarterly reviews and strategic initiatives that made my eyes glaze over faster than a Krispy Kreme conveyor belt. So, when I casually overheard her on the phone, "Okay, fine." I was totally eavesdropping while pretending to look for my favorite coffee mug in the kitchen, mentioning that her boss Gregory was hosting this massive grand opening gala for the new downtown branch, complete with crystal chandeliers, a live band, and apparently enough champagne to baptize a yacht. My curiosity went from 0 to Nancy Drew real quick. The kicker, she specifically told her friend on the phone that spouses weren't really expected to attend because it was more of a professional networking thing. Translation: I don't want my husband there, and I'm not entirely sure why, which should probably concern both of us. Now, here's the thing about me and red flags. Most people see them and think, maybe I should proceed with caution and have a mature conversation about my feelings. Me. I see a red flag and immediately think, challenge accepted. Let's turn this into a social experiment because apparently I never learned that curiosity killed the cat. Or maybe I just figured I've got 8 lives left and I'm feeling lucky. So, I made an executive decision right there in my kitchen, still holding that stupid coffee mug I'd been looking for as an excuse to lurk near her phone conversation. I was going to crash this party like a YouTube prankster with a trust fund and nothing to lose. My assistant Liam, God bless him, he's like a millennial version of Alfred from Batman if Alfred wore skinny jeans and had opinions about oat milk, caught wind of my plan the next morning when I casually mentioned I'd need the evening free on Friday. Liam's one of those people who's so organized that he color codes his color coding system. So naturally, his first instinct was to reach for his tablet and start typing up a formal RSVP like we were attending a royal wedding instead of what was essentially my wife's office party on steroids. "Sir, I can send over your details to the event coordinator," he said, his fingers already hovering over the keyboard with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoys administrative tasks. "We should probably confirm dietary restrictions, parking arrangements, and whether you need A+1 registered in the system." I looked at him with what I hoped was a mixture of paternal wisdom and barely contained mischief. "No need, Liam," I said, watching his face do that thing where he tries to hide his concern but fails miserably because his eyebrows betray him every single time. "Let's make it a surprise." Nothing says romance like public confusion and the faint possibility of security escorting me out. I could see him calculating the probability of disaster in his head, running through scenarios like he was preparing for a TED talk on how my boss's terrible decisions became learning opportunities. But to his credit, he just sighed, closed his tablet, and muttered something about updating my liability insurance, which I chose to interpret as enthusiastic support. The thing is, I wasn't just doing this because I missed Tessa, although I absolutely did miss her. 3 weeks of her coming home late and being weirdly distant had left me eating dinner alone more times than I cared to admit. And there's only so many nights a man can have a deep conversation with his microwave before he starts questioning his life choices. No, I was doing this primarily because curiosity is, has always been, and will forever be my favorite form of chaos. Some people skydive. Some people buy sports cars they can't afford. And me, I show up uninvited to corporate events just to see what happens when you throw a wrench into a perfectly planned machine. It's like performance art, except the canvas is social anxiety, and the paint is my complete disregard for conventional boundaries. As I stood in my closet Friday evening, Picking out what to wear to an event I technically wasn't invited to, I felt that familiar buzz of excitement mixed with the slight possibility that this could backfire spectacularly. I settled on a charcoal gray suit. Not too flashy, not too casual, the kind of outfit that says, I could either be a guest or someone who's about to serve you documents, and you won't know which until it's too late. Tessa had already left an hour earlier, claiming she needed to get there early to help with setup, which I found suspicious considering she'd never voluntarily arrived early to anything in her entire life, including our wedding. But I digress. I checked myself in the mirror one last time, adjusted my tie, and couldn't help but smile at my own reflection like a villain in a movie who's about to monologue about his master plan. Marcus, I said to myself, because talking to your reflection is totally normal and not at all a sign that you should reconsider your evening plans. You're either about to have the best night of your life or you're about to become a cautionary tale that Liam tells at parties. Either way, it's going to be interesting. I grabbed my keys, sent Liam a text that just said, "Wish me luck." To which he immediately responded with a gif of a dumpster fire and 3 concerned emojis, and headed out the door. The drive downtown gave me way too much time to think about what I was actually doing and whether this qualified as healthy relationship behavior or if I was crossing some line that would eventually require couples therapy and a lot of apologetic flowers. But here's the thing about gut feelings. Sometimes they're indigestion from that sketchy food truck you insisted was authentic, and sometimes they're your subconscious screaming that something's off and you need to pay attention. And my gut was currently performing an entire Broadway musical about how something was definitely absolutely 100% not right with this whole situation. As I pulled into the parking garage near the venue, watching all these dressed up people streaming toward the building like ants heading to a very expensive picnic, I felt that last little whisper of doubt try to talk me out of this. You could just turn around, it said. You could go home, order pizza, watch that documentary about weird crimes, and pretend you never had this idea. But I've never been good at listening to the reasonable voice in my head. Mostly because the unreasonable voice is so much more entertaining and has a better playlist. So I got out of the car, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the building with the confidence of someone who absolutely belonged there. Even though we both knew, me and that fancy building, that I absolutely definitely, spectacularly did not. The night air was crisp, the kind that makes you feel alive and slightly reckless. And as I approached the entrance where a bored-looking guy with a clipboard was checking names, I realized I hadn't actually planned how I was going to get past the velvet rope of corporate exclusivity. But sometimes, I've learned the best plans are no plans at all. Just pure momentum and the unwavering belief that if you walk like you own the place, people assume you do. So that's exactly what I did. I walked right up to that entrance like I'd personally funded the entire event, which, in a twist of irony that would become apparent very soon, wasn't actually that far from the truth. The event was pure pretentious glitter. The kind of setup that screams, we have money and we need everyone to know it, without actually saying it out loud because that would be tacky. And God forbid corporate America ever admits to being tacky while literally draping everything in gold fabric. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, catching the light and throwing it around the room in a way that probably cost more than most people's cars. The appetizers looked like they'd been designed by architects rather than chefs. Tiny, geometric, and way too beautiful to actually eat, which I'm pretty sure was the point. Because if people are too intimidated to touch the food, you save money on catering. And everywhere I looked, people were standing in those weird corporate clusters, holding champagne flutes like they were props in a stage play about success, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny, but had been told by someone important enough that laughing was basically a career move. The moment I walked in, and I mean the exact microsecond my shoes hit that polished marble floor, I could feel the atmosphere drop 2 degrees, maybe 3 if we're being generous with the metaphor. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and suddenly realize everyone's dress code memo went to their inbox, but somehow skipped yours. Except in this case, it wasn't about the clothes. It was about my entire existence being an unexpected variable in their carefully calculated evening. Eyes swiveled toward me like I was a glitch in the Matrix. A pop-up ad that appeared in the middle of their premium ad-free experience. You'd think I had walked in wearing flip-flops, board shorts, and a free Wi-Fi t-shirt with mysterious stains, not a perfectly acceptable charcoal suit that probably cost more than half the outfits in this room. But hey, perception is everything when you're the uninvited guest at the corporate ball. I spotted Tessa across the room almost immediately because my wife has this way of standing that's uniquely hers. Shoulders back, chin up, like she's perpetually ready to either accept an award or fight someone depending on the situation. She was talking to a group of colleagues. Her laugh a little too loud, a little too performed, and I felt that pang of something I couldn't quite name. Was it jealousy? Concern? Indigestion from the sketchy gas station coffee I'd grabbed on the way? The jury was still out, but before I could make my way over to her, I got intercepted by the man himself. The legend, the myth, the reason I was crashing this party in the first place. Tessa's boss, Gregory, spotted me from across the room with the kind of radar that only middle management develops. After years of monitoring employee bathroom breaks and tracking who leaves at exactly 5 o'clock, he made his way toward me with that power walk that guys like him perfect in front of mirrors. Probably while listening to motivational podcasts about alpha males and disrupting industries. His smile was what I can only describe as aggressively friendly, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes because the eyes are too busy calculating whether you're useful or irrelevant. "Oh, you must be Tessa's husband," he said, extending a hand that gripped mine with just a little too much pressure, like he was trying to assert dominance through handshake sigh alone. I smiled back, matching his energy with the kind of pleasant neutrality that drives aggressive personalities absolutely insane. "That's me," I said. "Guilty as charged, Your Honor." He laughed at that like I'd said something clever, which I hadn't. But I'd learned a long time ago that powerful people are so used to others laughing at their jokes that they assume everyone else's comments are equally hilarious. "You're the handyman, right?" he asked. And there it was. That casual condescension wrapped in a question mark. The verbal equivalent of patting someone on the head while standing on a stepladder. Now, I could have corrected him right there. Could have dropped the bomb that would have made his smile crack like cheap china. But where's the fun in revealing your hand before you've even seen the flop? So instead, I went with misdirection, my favorite magic trick. "Only on weekends," I replied, keeping my tone light and breezy like we were discussing the weather instead of him casually insulting my career. During weekdays, I build other people's futures. I watched his face do that thing where the brain tries to process whether what I just said was profound or pretentious, ultimately landing on probably both. But I'll laugh anyway because I'm the boss and that's what I do. He laughed. Really laughed like I delivered the punchline to a joke he didn't quite get but didn't want to admit it. The people around him, his little entourage of corporate yes-men and yes-women with their plastered-on smiles and nervous energy chuckled too, probably out of that primal fear of unemployment that makes office workers laugh at things that aren't funny and agree with opinions they don't share. It was like watching a nature documentary where the smaller animals mimic the alpha's behavior to avoid being eaten, except instead of the Serengeti, we were in a rented event space that smelled like expensive cologne and desperation. Gregory clapped me on the shoulder with that fake camaraderie that managers think creates team bonding, but actually just creates resentment and memes on private Slack channels. "Well, good for you, buddy," he said. And I hate being called buddy by people who aren't my buddies, but I let it slide because I was playing the long game here. It's great that Tessa has such a supportive partner who understands her career comes first. The way he said it made supportive partner sound like a participation trophy, like I was some stay-at-home puppy waiting for her to come home and feed me treats for being a good boy. I took a sip of champagne from a passing tray, mostly to give myself something to do with my hands besides making fists, and surveyed the room with fresh eyes. This wasn't just a party. It was a theatrical production, and Gregory was the self-appointed director, moving from group to group like a politician, working a rally, touching shoulders, laughing too loud, making sure everyone knew he was the center of this particular universe. And as I watched him work the room, wrapping his arm around employees with that proprietary confidence, something clicked into place in my brain. This wasn't about celebrating the new branch. This was about celebrating Gregory. And everyone here was just an extra in his personal vanity project. Gregory had that voice that could make even small talk sound like an insult. You know what I mean? It was this particular combination of tone and cadence that somehow managed to be simultaneously patronizing and self-congratulatory. Like every sentence that came out of his mouth was narrated by someone who thought they were the protagonist in a business school case study. The kind of voice that makes you want to check your pockets to make sure he didn't steal your wallet while complimenting your shoes. I've met guys like Gregory before. Hell, I've employed guys like Gregory before. Back when I thought confidence and competence were the same thing, which was a mistake that cost me about 6 months of profits and a whole lot of Advil. As the evening progressed and the champagne flowed like someone had broken a dam made entirely of expensive French grapes, Gregory really hit his stride, working the room like a game show host who'd forgotten this wasn't actually his show. He started this impromptu speech about his company's expansion, using possessive pronouns with the kind of frequency that would make an English teacher weep, conveniently forgetting, or more likely genuinely not knowing that his entire operational budget, his fancy new branch, and probably the designer water bottles in the break room all came from a board of directors he'd never actually met face to face. Well, technically he'd met one of them, except he didn't know it yet because that particular board member was currently standing 3 feet away from him, sipping mediocre champagne and contemplating whether corporate sabotage via truth-telling counted as a misdemeanor or just good entertainment. This expansion, Gregory announced to a captive audience of employees who literally couldn't leave without it being noted on their performance reviews, represents everything we've built together as a team. I nearly choked on my drink at that one because we was doing some seriously heavy lifting in that sentence. Like Atlas holding up the world, except Atlas was taking full credit for the planet's existence. The man had this gift for making collective achievements sound like personal victories. The corporate equivalent of a guy who shows up to a group project presentation, contributes one slide, and then tells everyone at the party that he basically did the whole thing. But the real kicker came when he spotted Tessa in the crowd and his face lit up like a dad seeing his kid at a school play, except creepier and with more HR violations waiting to happen. He navigated through the crowd with that purposeful stride that important people use when they want everyone to watch them walk. And before I could process what was happening, he'd wrapped an arm around my wife's shoulder with a casualness that made my eye twitch involuntarily. "She's our brightest employee," he proclaimed loudly enough that half the room turned to look, including a woman who I'm pretty sure was the actual brightest employee based on the way she rolled her eyes so hard I could hear it from across the room. "You should be proud she married up." Now, let me tell you something about that phrase, married up. It's one of those supposedly complimentary things that's actually just an insult wearing a party hat and pretending to be festive. It implies a hierarchy, a ladder, a ranking system where one person is objectively better than the other. And in this case, Gregory was heavily suggesting that my wife had climbed the social ladder by marrying someone who worked in her company under his management, which would theoretically make him the peak of this metaphorical mountain. The logic was so backwards, it could have been a pretzel. But here we were living in Gregory's reality where he was the sun and everyone else was just grateful to be planets in his solar system. I sipped my champagne slowly, buying myself exactly 3 seconds to decide whether I was going to let this slide or whether I was going to start lighting matches in this powder keg of a conversation. Spoiler alert, I've never been good at letting things slide. Mostly because my mouth has this annoying habit of operating independently from my brain's better judgment. "Oh, I'm extremely proud," I said, my voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that warns of incoming sarcasm like dark clouds before a thunderstorm. Some people climb ladders, others just stand at the top and watch. The air around us got thick enough to cut with a knife. That special kind of tension that happens when someone says something that could be interpreted as either profound wisdom or a direct insult, depending on how much you're willing to think about it. Gregory's face went through this fascinating journey of expressions. First, confusion like he was trying to translate my words from English to English, then a flicker of suspicion that maybe I'd just insulted him, but he couldn't quite figure out how. And finally landing on that fake laugh that people use when they're not sure if they should be offended, but don't want to seem like they don't get it. He blinked at me once, twice, 3 times, and I swear I could practically hear the Windows error sound effect playing in his head. That little do-do-do noise that computers make when they've encountered a problem they can't solve. You could see his brain trying to reboot, searching through his internal database of power moves and conversational dominance tactics coming up empty because nothing in his middle management training had prepared him for someone who wasn't intimidated by his title, his voice, or his aggressive handshake technique. Tessa, God bless her, was doing this thing where she was smiling, but also looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole, which I recognize as her, "My husband is causing a scene," and I don't know whether to be embarrassed or impressed expression. I'd seen it before at dinner parties, family reunions, and that one time at the grocery store when I got into a philosophical debate with the cashier about the existential implications of self-checkout machines. Her hand tightened around her champagne glass like she was considering whether the stem was strong enough to use as a weapon if this conversation went further south than it already had. The little crowd that had gathered around us for Gregory's impromptu Tessa appreciation moment was now doing that thing where they pretend they're not listening while obviously hanging on every word. Their eyes darting between Gregory and me like spectators at a tennis match played entirely with passive-aggressive commentary. I could see them mentally taking notes, preparing the group chat messages they'd send the moment they got to the bathroom, screenshots and all. The buffet looked like it had been catered by an accountant with anxiety, which is to say everything was perfectly arranged, color-coordinated, and probably cost 3 times what it should have because someone convinced Gregory that imported cheeses and organic kale garnishes were essential for brand positioning. There were little cards with calligraphy explaining each dish like we were at a museum exhibit instead of a corporate party because apparently shrimp cocktail needed a backstory involving sustainable fishing practices and artisanal cocktail sauce. I'm all for knowing where my food comes from, but when the description is longer than a CVS receipt, someone's trying too hard. I positioned myself strategically near the shrimp bowl. Partly because I was actually hungry after skipping dinner in my excitement to crash this party, and partly because the buffet table offered an excellent vantage point for people watching without looking like a creep. It's amazing what you can learn about office dynamics by watching who eats with whom, who's avoiding the carbs, and who's on their fourth trip to the dessert station while pretending it's their first. The shrimp were pretty good. I'll give them that. Definitely not the frozen garbage you get at budget conferences where the ice sculpture costs more than the actual food. While I was contemplating whether it would be socially acceptable to just camp out next to the cocktail sauce for the rest of the evening, I became acutely aware that I'd become the subject of several whispered conversations happening at various points around the room. You know that feeling when you can't hear exactly what people are saying, but you can feel the weight of their judgment like humidity before a rainstorm. Yeah, that employees were giving me these side eyes that they thought were subtle but were about as discreet as a foghorn at a library, leaning into each other's personal space and murmuring things behind their champagne flutes like they were in a spy movie, except everyone could totally see them. I caught fragments of conversations as people passed by the buffet table, pretending to deliberate over cheese selections while actually trying to get a closer look at me. That's her husband. One woman in a navy pantsuit whispered to her colleague, her tone suggesting she'd expected someone either significantly more impressive or significantly less. I couldn't quite tell which. He looks normal, another guy added. And I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult, but given the context, I was leaning toward insult. In their defense, I probably didn't fit whatever mental image they constructed based on Tessa's mysterious "I don't talk about my personal life at work" policy, which apparently had created a void that office gossip had filled with pure speculation and possibly a fantasy version of me that looked like a Hollywood handyman with abs and a tool belt. Gregory, because the universe has a sense of humor, and that sense of humor is mostly ironic, decided this was the perfect moment to make another appearance in my evening. He strutted by with the confidence of a peacock who just discovered mirrors, trailing a small entourage of what I assumed were either senior managers or people who'd lost a bet and had to follow him around all night. He stopped when he saw me. His face doing that thing where he was clearly trying to remember if he'd already talked to me or if all unimportant people just blurred together in his mind like background characters in a video game. "So, what do you do for a living?" He snapped his fingers like that would somehow summon my name from the void, which was particularly rich considering he'd already asked me this exact question earlier. But I guess when you're Gregory, people are only memorable if they're useful or if they have the authority to fire you. And he thought I was neither. "Marcus," I supplied helpfully, popping another shrimp into my mouth because if I was going to be interrogated about my career choices, I was at least going to do it while eating free food. And I dabble in real estate. You could say I have a few properties under management. I kept my tone casual, like I was discussing a hobby rather than a business portfolio, because the best way to deliver information that's going to explode later is to make it sound as boring as possible in the moment. "Oh, like rentals?" he asked. And there it was again. That voice that could make even genuine questions sound condescending, like he was talking to a child who just announced they wanted to be an astronaut when they grew up. He said, "Rentals," the way someone might say adorable while patting a puppy with that tone that suggested he was humoring me by even engaging in this conversation. His entourage nodded along like those bobblehead dolls people put on their dashboards, agreeing with implications that hadn't even been fully stated yet. "More like entire buildings," I replied casually, reaching for a napkin. Because shrimp cocktail is delicious but messy, and I've learned that it's hard to maintain dignity while having cocktail sauce on your chin. I said it with the same energy someone might use to correct a minor detail. Like, actually, it's pronounced GIF, not GIF. Giving no indication that I'd just dropped information that should have made his brain perform emergency calculations about exactly who he'd been talking to for the past hour. He laughed again, and at this point, I was starting to think maybe Gregory just laughed at everything as a defense mechanism, like a nervous tic, except wrapped in false confidence and expensive cologne. "Well, good for you. Must be nice to have a wife who brings home the big bucks." He said it loud enough that several people nearby turned to look, and I saw Tessa across the room physically was, her shoulders tensing up like she'd just heard nails on a chalkboard. The implication was clear. In Gregory's worldview, I was a kept man, living off my wife's salary, probably spending my days watching daytime television and occasionally pretending to be productive with my rental properties that he clearly imagined were like two duplexes in a questionable neighborhood. "Yeah," I said, my smile getting wider because I could feel the punchline building in my chest like a sneeze. "You can't hold back. She really owns this place." I let the words hang in the air. Perfectly ambiguous. Technically true in multiple ways that Gregory's brain was definitely not processing because he was too busy enjoying what he thought was agreement with his assessment of our marriage dynamic. Tessa coughed into her wine glass across the room, a sound that I recognized as her, "Oh God, what is he doing now?" cough, the one that usually preceded her dragging me away from family dinners or party conversations before I could cause irreparable damage to our social standing. If irony were a currency, I'd have retired again, bought a private island, and named it "Told You So." Halfway through the night, when the champagne had sufficiently loosened everyone's professional facades and the room had reached that perfect level of corporate buzz where bad decisions start sounding like team-building opportunities, Gregory decided it was time for a toast. Because of course he did. You can't have a party celebrating Gregory without Gregory making a speech about Gregory thinly disguised as appreciation for everyone else. It's like a law of physics or something. For every action of corporate success, there's an equal and opposite reaction of a middle manager taking credit for it. He tapped a spoon against his champagne glass with the kind of theatrical flair that suggested he'd been practicing this moment in his bathroom mirror, probably while wearing a bathrobe and imagining himself as some kind of business mogul in a movie montage. The crystal made this perfect little ringing sound that cut through the conversations like a knife through butter, and everyone obediently stopped talking and turned toward him like well-trained seals waiting for someone to throw them a fish. The room fell into that expectant silence that happens when the boss wants attention. The kind of silence that's less about genuine interest and more about self-preservation instincts kicking in. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gregory boomed. His voice taking on that motivational speaker quality that makes you want to either applaud or cringe, possibly both simultaneously. He raised his glass high, champagne slushing dangerously close to the rim because he was more focused on looking important than on basic liquid physics. "Let's toast to success. And to the supportive partners who stay home and watch us shine." He delivered that last line with a wink and a gesture in my general direction, like he was doing me a favor by acknowledging my existence, like I should be grateful he'd included the stay-at-home spouses in his moment of corporate glory. The room erupted in laughter. That specific kind of obligatory office laughter that sounds less like genuine amusement and more like a survival mechanism. The auditory equivalent of showing your belly to a predator so they don't eat you. People raised their glasses dutifully, their smiles plastered on their faces with the same authenticity as a politician's campaign photo. I watched as several employees glanced in my direction with expressions ranging from pity to second-hand embarrassment like they were watching someone get roasted at a comedy show. Except nobody had signed up to be the volunteer. My wife smiled nervously. Her face doing that thing where she was trying to look like she thought it was funny while also internally screaming, which I learned to recognize after 8 years of marriage and countless family dinners where my jokes landed somewhere between inappropriate and were never invited back here again. Her eyes met mine across the room with an apologetic intensity that could have melted steel, and I could practically read her thoughts. "Please don't make a scene. Please don't make a scene. Oh God, he's definitely going to make a scene." But here's the thing about me in moments like these. I've never been particularly good at letting condescending nonsense slide by without at least lobbing a verbal grenade in return. Call it a character flaw, call it pride, call it whatever you want. But when someone takes a shot at you disguised as a compliment, you've got two choices. Swallow it and smile, or return fire with interest. And I've always been more of a return fire kind of guy. Mostly because swallowing your pride gives you indigestion and therapy bills. I raised my own glass slowly, deliberately, with the kind of casual confidence that comes from knowing something everyone else doesn't, which is basically my favorite position to be in at any social gathering. The movement caught Gregory's attention, and I saw his face light up with what he probably thought was camaraderie, like we were buddies now, bonding over his hilarious observation about traditional gender roles and spousal dynamics. "Oh, Gregory, buddy, you sweet summer child. You have no idea what's coming. Cheers to bosses who think success is a solo act." I announced, my voice carrying across the room with crystal clarity because unlike Gregory, I didn't need to shout to be heard. I just needed to say something interesting enough that people actually wanted to listen. I paused for exactly one beat, letting the words sink in just enough that people started doing mental math about whether I'd just said what they thought I'd said. "I'd toast your leadership, but I'm afraid the HR policy forbids fiction." The room went from polite laughter to absolutely deafening silence in about half a second, which is faster than most people can process a surprise plot twist in a movie. You could have heard a pin drop, except instead of a pin, it was more like everyone's jaw simultaneously hitting the floor. Then slowly, like a wave building before it crashes on the shore, genuine laughter started rippling through the crowd. Not that fake corporate laughter from before, but real actual amusement from people who'd probably been waiting months or even years for someone to call out Gregory's particular brand of self-congratulatory leadership. The intern near the back, a kid who couldn't have been more than 23 and still had that fresh out of college optimism that corporate life hadn't completely crushed yet, actually snorted into his drink, then looked absolutely terrified that he'd made an audible sound, his eyes going wide like a deer that just realized it's standing in the middle of a highway. A woman from accounting that I vaguely recognized from Tessa's company holiday card photos, pressed her lips together so hard, trying not to laugh that her face turned red, her shoulders shaking with suppressed amusement. Even some of the senior managers, the ones who probably had to deal with Gregory's ego on a daily basis, couldn't quite hide their smirks behind their champagne glasses. The laughter this time wasn't polite. It was real. It was cathartic. And it was definitely at Gregory's expense rather than mine. It was the kind of laughter that happens when someone finally says out loud what everyone's been thinking in private Slack channels and bathroom conversations for months. You could feel the energy in the room shift like someone had just flipped a switch and suddenly this wasn't Gregory's party anymore. It was just a party and the Emperor's clothes were looking pretty transparent under the crystal chandelier lighting. Gregory's face went through a fascinating evolution of expressions in the span of about 5 seconds. First came confusion because his brain was still processing whether what I'd said was a compliment wrapped in weird phrasing or an actual insult. Then came the dawning realization as he replayed my words in his head and his face started to flush. That particular shade of red that happens when someone's blood pressure spikes and their ego takes a direct hit simultaneously. His smile, that perfectly practiced CEO smile that probably cost him hours of mirror time, twitched at the corners like it was trying to decide whether to stay put or abandon ship entirely. The man hated being out funny. You could see it written all over his face like subtitles in a foreign film. In his world, he was the one who made the jokes. He was the one who got the laughs. He was the center of attention. And everyone else was just the supporting cast. Having someone, especially someone he'd categorized as unimportant as just the supportive spouse who stayed home, flip the script on him in front of his entire staff was probably the social equivalent of getting pantsed at prom. His entourage, those loyal followers who'd been nodding along to everything he said all night, suddenly found the floor very interesting, studying their shoes like they contained the secrets of the universe. As dessert rolled in, tiny, pretentious things that looked like they'd been assembled by surgeons rather than pastry chefs. Each one a work of art that probably cost $15 and would disappear in one bite. Gregory was clearly regrouping, gathering his wounded pride like a general rallying troops after an unexpected ambush. I could see it in the way he straightened his shoulders, adjusted his tie, and scanned the room with renewed determination. He wasn't going to let some nobody's spouse get the last laugh at his party, at his event, in his moment of glory. Oh no, Gregory was about to make a comeback, and I could smell it coming like rain before a storm. He made his way back over to where I was standing, having migrated from the shrimp station to the dessert table, because if you're going to watch a man dig his own grave, you might as well do it while eating a chocolate mousse that costs more than most people's lunch budgets. His entourage had thinned out a bit. Apparently, public humiliation isn't great for maintaining your follower count, but he still had a couple of loyal supporters flanking him, like Secret Service agents protecting someone who definitely didn't deserve protection. Gregory leaned in with that smirk again, the one that had probably worked on intimidating junior employees and interns, but was about to be as effective as a water gun at a house fire. You could tell he thought he was being clever, that he'd found the perfect angle to reassert his dominance in this increasingly weird social chess match we were playing. So, Marcus, he said, my name dripping with condescension like honey from a particularly aggressive bear. How does it feel being married to the real breadwinner? Now, there are moments in life where you can choose to be the bigger person, to take the high road, to smile and nod and let ignorance slide by without comment. This was not going to be one of those moments. I'd already committed to this path the second I walked through those doors uninvited. And there's no point in half-assing chaos once you've decided to embrace it fully. Plus, that chocolate mousse had given me the sugar rush I needed to really commit to what was about to happen. I grinned at him. The kind of smile that probably should have served as a warning label, like those signs at amusement parks that say, you must be this tall to ride. Except mine would say, you must be this prepared for your world to flip upside down. Delicious, actually, I said, taking another spoonful of mousse for dramatic effect, especially since the bread comes from my bakery. I let that hang in the air for exactly 2 seconds, watching his face scrunch up in confusion like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't have enough numbers. Sorry, what? Gregory said, his smirk faltering like a car engine that just realized it was out of gas. Around us, conversations had started to die down again because apparently I'd become the evening's entertainment, which was fine by me since I'd paid for the venue anyway, though Gregory didn't know that yet. The word yet was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. I turned toward the chief financial officer, Clara, who had been sitting quietly at a nearby table for most of the evening, nursing the same glass of wine and watching the proceedings with the tired expression of someone who'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. Clara was one of those sharp, no-nonsense women in her 50s who'd probably forgotten more about running a business than Gregory would ever learn. And I'd always appreciated her direct communication style and her ability to make grown men cry during budget meetings. Clara, I called out, my voice friendly but loud enough that everyone within a 20-foot radius could hear, which at this point was basically everyone because the entire party had somehow migrated toward our little drama like moths to a particularly entertaining flame. Could you pass me the check file? The one you and I signed when we approved the new branch budget. Her fork, which had been halfway to her mouth with what looked like a very expensive piece of cheesecake, froze in midair. Her eyes widened just slightly, and I watched her brain process what I just asked, what I just implied, and what was about to happen in the next 60 seconds. To her credit, she didn't miss a beat. Clara hadn't gotten to CFO by being slow on the uptake or bad at reading rooms. "Sir," she said, and that single word, "sir," dropped into the conversation like a nuclear bomb with a polite accent. "You mean the file?" The temperature in the room dropped about 15 degrees. Suddenly, everyone's champagne tasted a little different. The crystal light seemed a little brighter, and the background music that had been playing all night became very conspicuous in its suddenly noticeable presence. People shifted in their seats, sat down their drinks, turned toward our little tableau like we were the main act in a play they'd accidentally bought tickets for. Gregory looked confused, which was fair because his entire understanding of the corporate hierarchy was currently being challenged in real time. He glanced between me and Clara like he was watching a tennis match, except instead of a ball being volleyed back and forth, it was his career and reputation. "What file?" he asked, his voice not quite as confident as it had been 30 seconds ago. "What are you talking about?" I could see the wheels turning in his head, smoke practically coming out of his ears as he tried to piece together what was happening. The problem with guys like Gregory is that they're so convinced they're at the top of the food chain that they never bother to look up and check if there's something bigger swimming above them. They see the title on their door, the respect from their direct reports, and assume that's the whole picture, never considering that maybe they're middle management in someone else's empire. Several other senior staff members had gone very still, the kind of still that happens when animals sense a predator nearby. The VP of Operations, whose name I remembered was something like Gerald or maybe Jerome. Honestly, I tried not to memorize everyone's names because that felt like overkill, had gone pale. His dessert fork clattering onto his plate with a sound that echoed in the increasingly quiet room. The head of HR, a woman named Patricia, who I'd met exactly twice in board meetings and who ran her department with the efficiency of a Swiss watch and the mercy of a medieval executioner, had her hand over her mouth, her eyes darting between Gregory and me like she was already mentally drafting the paperwork that was going to follow this conversation. "I think," Laura said slowly, setting down her fork with deliberate care and reaching for her phone, which I knew contained all the relevant files, because Clara was nothing if not prepared for every possible scenario, including apparently the surprise appearance of the company's majority shareholder at a branch opening where said shareholder proceeds to destroy the CEO's ego in front of the entire staff. "That Mr. Hale is referring to the Q3 expansion budget that was approved by the board last quarter." "Mr. Hale," Gregory repeated, his voice cracking slightly on my last name like it was a foreign word he'd never encountered before. His face was doing this fascinating thing where confusion was slowly morphing into dawning horror, like watching someone realize they'd been swimming in the shallow end of the pool while thinking they were in the ocean. "Wait, Hale? Like Hale Industries? Like the company you work for?" "Yes," I finished for him because watching people connect dots in real time is one of my favorite spectator sports. Right up there with watching someone try to assemble IKEA furniture without reading the instructions. I stood up slowly, taking my time because moments like these deserve to be savored like a fine wine or a really good revenge plot in a movie where the hero finally reveals they were 10 steps ahead the whole time. I adjusted my jacket with the kind of casual precision that suggested this wasn't a big deal to me, which it wasn't, but was clearly becoming the biggest deal of Gregory's entire professional life based on the way all the color had drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug at the bottom of his feet. The room had gone so quiet you could hear the ice melting in people's drinks, the soft buzz of the crystal chandeliers overhead, and what I'm pretty sure was Gregory's heart rate accelerating to dangerous levels. I smiled, and not the fake corporate smile that everyone had been wearing like masks all evening, but a genuine smile, the kind that comes from deep satisfaction and the knowledge that you're about to drop a truth bomb so massive it'll register on the Richter scale. "I'm Marcus Hale," I said, letting each word land with the weight of a judge's gavel in a courtroom drama. "Majority shareholder and founder of this company. You've been working for me, Greg." I dropped the Ori from his name deliberately because nothing says I own you quite like unauthorized nickname privileges, and also because I knew it would irritate him, which at this point was just the cherry on top of an already delicious sundae of schadenfreude. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. Gasps rippled through the hall like a wave at a baseball game. Except instead of coordinated fun, it was pure shock and disbelief spreading from person to person as the implications of what I'd just said registered in their champagne-soaked brains. Someone dropped a glass. I heard it shatter somewhere near the back of the room. And honestly, that was perfect timing. Really added to the dramatic atmosphere. The DJ, bless his heart, had been playing some generic smooth jazz background music all night. And in this moment of cosmic comedy, the track ended right as I finished speaking, leaving us in complete silence, except for the sound of Gregory's world crumbling around him like a sand castle at high tide. People's phones started coming out, not even subtly, just blatantly held up like they were at a concert, and I was the headlining act. I saw at least 5 people open their LinkedIn apps, probably to confirm what I just said, searching Marcus Hale and Hale Industries and watching their entire understanding of the evening's power dynamics get rewritten in real time. The intern who snorted earlier looked like he might pass out from the sheer drama of it all. His eyes wide enough to see the whites all the way around, his mouth hanging open in that perfect O shape that you usually only see in cartoons. Gregory stuttered. Actually stuttered. And I'd never seen him at a loss for words before because the man normally had verbal diarrhea. Just couldn't shut up if his life depended on it. But right now, he was struggling to form complete sentences like he'd forgotten how language worked. You're joking. He finally managed, his voice cracking like a teenager going through puberty. His face had gone from red to white to a kind of grayish-green that suggested his expensive dinner might be making a return appearance soon. This is some kind of you can't be. Wouldn't that be convenient? I replied, my tone conversational like we were discussing the weather instead of his complete professional annihilation. I took a step closer to him, not threatening, just closing the distance enough that he couldn't mistake my next words for anything other than what they were. A statement of fact delivered with the full weight of ownership behind it. You've been mocking your staff, misusing funds, and flirting with my wife. Not the best performance review, huh? That last part about flirting with Tessa was maybe a slight exaggeration. Gregory had been condescending and possessive, but not overtly flirty, but I figured if we were already burning bridges, we might as well throw some extra gasoline on the fire for good measure. Plus, I'd seen the way he touched her shoulder earlier. That casual ownership that bosses sometimes claim over their employees like they're property instead of people. And that had pissed me off more than all the condescending comments about my supposed career as a kept husband combined. He turned even paler, if that was possible, like someone had applied a second coat of white paint over the first. Sir, he started, and hearing him call me sir, after an evening of buddy and barely disguised contempt was its own special kind of satisfaction. It was like watching a bully realize the kid they've been picking on is actually the principal's son. Except in this case, I wasn't the principal's son. I was the guy who owned the whole damn school. Don't worry, I said, cutting him off before he could launch into whatever graveling explanation or desperate excuse he was formulating in his panic-stricken brain. I won't fire you here. HR hates paperwork during parties. I glanced over at Patricia, the head of HR, who despite the chaos, was taking notes on her phone with the dedication of a court stenographer, probably already drafting the separation agreement in her head. But by Monday, I expect a resignation letter so polished it blinds me. Single-spaced, proper formatting, maybe throw in some of that corporate buzzword salad you're so fond of, really make it sing. The room was still frozen. Everyone processing this shift in reality like their brains needed to reboot. Clara was hiding a smile behind her wine glass. And I caught her eye and gave her a small nod of acknowledgement because she'd played her part perfectly. And also because I knew she'd been dealing with Gregory's nonsense for months and was probably enjoying this moment as much as I was. The VP of Operations, I decided his name was definitely Gerald. Looked like he was running calculations in his head, probably trying to figure out if he'd ever been dismissive to me at any board meetings and whether his own job was in jeopardy. Tessa across the room had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wider than I'd ever seen them, and I couldn't quite read her expression. Was it horror, shock, admiration? Probably some combination of all three, plus a healthy dose of I can't believe you just did that. And we're going to have a very long conversation about this when we get home. But underneath it all, I saw something else. A flicker of satisfaction, maybe even pride, because as much as she might scold me later for the dramatic reveal, I knew she'd been dealing with Gregory's condescension, too. And watching him get taken down several dozen pegs had to feel at least a little bit good. Gregory's entourage had completely abandoned him at this point, backing away like he was radioactive, which in career terms he absolutely was. Nobody wants to be associated with the guy who just got publicly destroyed by the owner of the company, especially when said destruction was entirely his own fault for being an arrogant jerk who couldn't resist mocking the wrong person. It was like watching rats desert a sinking ship, except the rats were middle managers in expensive suits and the ship was Gregory's career and reputation going down in flames. I think Clara said into the silence, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been CFO long enough to see everything and be surprised by nothing. That concludes this evening's entertainment. Perhaps we should all head home and reconvene during normal business hours. It was a diplomatic way of saying, show's over, folks. Nothing more to see here. And also a graceful exit strategy for everyone who didn't want to be standing in the blast radius when this situation got even more awkward, which it inevitably would if everyone kept standing around staring. People started moving slowly at first, then faster as they realized this was their chance to escape and immediately start texting everyone they knew about what they just witnessed. I walked out to slow claps. Literally actual slow claps, and not the sarcastic kind that usually accompanies someone's spectacular failure, but the genuine appreciative kind that you hear in movies when the underdog finally stands up to the bully. Except in this case, I wasn't really the underdog. I was more like the secret final boss who'd been disguised as a regular NPC the whole time. The interns started it, which was fitting because interns are usually the only people in corporate America who still have enough soul left to appreciate good drama when they see it. One brave kid near the dessert table just started clapping slowly, deliberately, and then his friend joined in, and then suddenly it spread like wildfire through the younger employees who'd probably been on the receiving end of Gregory's condescension more times than they could count. The senior staff looked conflicted, caught between wanting to join in and worrying about whether applauding the public humiliation of their now former CEO was a career-lifting move, which honestly, fair enough. Corporate survival instincts are strong, and nobody wants to be the person who backed the wrong horse, even when the wrong horse was clearly a jackass who'd been riding everyone else's coattails to success. But a few of them, the ones who'd probably been around long enough to not care anymore, or who'd reached that perfect level of seniority where they could get away with anything short of embezzlement, gave me subtle nods of approval, the corporate equivalent of a standing ovation. I made my way through the crowd, which parted for me like I was Moses and they were the Red Sea. Except instead of fleeing from Pharaoh's army, they were fleeing from the awkwardness of making eye contact with me after spending the entire evening treating me like the help. It was beautiful in its own weird way, watching people suddenly remember that they'd maybe been less than welcoming to the guy who signed their paychecks. Their faces doing mental gymnastics, trying to recall if they'd said anything insulting within my earshot. Spoiler alert, several of them definitely had, but I wasn't keeping score. Okay, fine. I was totally keeping score, but I wasn't going to do anything about it because I'm petty, not vindictive. There's a difference, and it's a line I maintain with great care. The fresh night air hit my face as I walked through those glass doors. And let me tell you, it felt better than the champagne, better than the chocolate mousse, better than any of the overpriced everything that had filled that venue. It was the air of freedom, of justice served, of a job well done, with just a hint of expensive cologne and urban downtown smells that reminded me why I usually avoided these kinds of events. The city was alive around me, completely unaware that inside that building, a small corporate drama had just played out like a Greek tragedy, except with better lighting and worse moral lessons. Behind me, I could hear the whispers buzzing like a hive of very gossipy bees. Fragments of conversations floating through the doors before they swung shut. "That's the owner," one voice said, high-pitched with disbelief. "Oh my God, Greg's finished." Another added, and I heard what sounded like genuine schadenfreude in that tone, which suggested Gregory hadn't exactly been winning any popularity contests among his staff. "Did you see his face?" Someone else chimed in, followed by laughter that was probably accompanied by frantic texting and screenshots being shared on whatever group chat these people used to survive their work days. I chuckled to myself, pulling out my phone to text Liam that I was ready for pickup because yes, I'd arranged for my driver to be on standby because I'm not an amateur and I knew this evening was either going to end with me making a dramatic exit or being escorted out by security. And either way, I didn't want to deal with parking. My driver, Victor, pulled up in the black sedan within 30 seconds. The man had timing that would make a Swiss watchmaker jealous and opened the car door with the kind of professional discretion that comes from years of driving rich people to and from situations they probably shouldn't have gotten themselves into in the first place. "Good evening, sir," Victor said, his face perfectly neutral except for the tiny smirk playing at the corner of his mouth because Victor had been with me long enough to know when I'd been up to something. "Successful event?" He asked it casually, like he was inquiring about the weather, but I could hear the genuine curiosity underneath because I'd given him exactly zero details about why I needed a driver for my wife's office party. And Victor was smart enough to know that when I was being deliberately vague, entertainment was sure to follow. "Educational," I said, sliding into the leather seat that still smelled like new car even though the sedan was 3 years old. Because Victor maintained this vehicle better than most people maintain their relationships. "We learned our CEO is allergic to humility, accountability, and basic human decency. Also, that shrimp cocktail at corporate events is surprisingly decent." So, the evening wasn't a complete waste. Buckled my seat belt while Victor closed my door with that perfect soft click that expensive cars make. The kind that whispers, "You paid too much for this," in the most satisfying way possible. He smirked for real this time as he got into the driver's seat, adjusting the rear view mirror, even though it didn't need adjusting. Just giving himself something to do while he processed what I'd said. "I'll have HR draft a resignation gift basket," Victor offered. And this was why I liked him. The man understood that sometimes the best response to corporate drama was more corporate drama wrapped up in the absurd formality of office traditions like gift baskets that nobody actually wants but everyone feels obligated to give. Include tissues, I said, settling back into the seat and watching the city lights blur past as we pulled away from the curb. Make it thoughtful. Maybe throw in one of those motivational books about how to bounce back from career setbacks. Really lean into the irony. I was being facetious. Obviously, HR wasn't actually going to send Gregory a gift basket. That would be adding insult to injury in a way that crossed the line from justified payback into cruel and unusual punishment. And I tried to maintain at least some semblance of professional standards, even when publicly destroying someone's ego. Victor chuckled, a deep sound that rumbled from his chest, and I saw his shoulders shake with barely suppressed laughter. Shall I take the scenic route home, sir, or do you need to get back quickly before Mrs. Hale calls wondering where you disappeared to? It was a valid question because Tessa had definitely seen me leave, and she was probably currently having a mild panic attack while trying to decide whether to follow me out or stay and do damage control with her colleagues who just discovered her husband was basically their ultimate boss. Scenic route, I decided because I wasn't quite ready to face the music yet. And by music, I meant my wife's inevitable interrogation about why I decided tonight was the perfect night to reveal my identity instead of I don't know, mentioning it casually over breakfast sometime in the past 3 weeks when she'd been complaining about Gregory's management style. Give me at least 20 minutes to come up with a good explanation for why I crashed her office party and destroyed her boss's career in front of everyone she works with. Might I suggest leading with he deserved it? Victor offered helpfully, merging into traffic with the smooth confidence of someone who'd been navigating city streets for longer than some of these other drivers had been alive. I find that establishing moral high ground early in an argument significantly improves outcomes. Victor, buddy, you're a philosopher and a driver, I said, pulling out my phone to check my messages, which had already started coming in. Liam had sent approximately 7 texts, each one more excited than the last. Apparently, the internetwork had already spread word about what happened and it had reached social media faster than a celebrity scandal. Clara had sent a simple well played sir with a wine glass emoji which was high praise coming from her. And Tessa had sent a single text that just said we need to talk with a period at the end which in wife speak translated to you're not in trouble exactly but you're definitely going to have to explain yourself and it better be good. I typed back a quick on my way home, love you, and added a heart emoji because sometimes the best defense is a good offense or in this case a preemptive reminder that whatever I'd done it from a place of love and protecting her from a boss who clearly didn't respect her or her husband. Whether that excuse would actually work remained to be seen. But I had 20 minutes of scenic route to refine my argument and I'd talk my way out of worse situations. Probably, maybe. Okay, definitely not. But optimism is important in a marriage. Tessa came home later, much later than I'd expected, which gave me way too much time to sit on the couch rehearsing my defense like a lawyer preparing for the trial of the century. Except my opposing counsel was my wife, and she had access to all my weak points and emotional vulnerabilities. I'd changed out of my suit into sweatpants and a t-shirt, partly for comfort, and partly because it's harder to stay mad at someone in sweatpants. It's a scientific fact I just made up, but choose to believe anyway. I heard her keys in the door around 11:30. That distinctive jangle followed by the sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floor with a rhythm that suggested she was either exhausted or furious, possibly both. When she walked into the living room, her makeup was smeared, mascara tracking down her cheeks in thin black lines that made her look like she'd either been crying or had gotten caught in unexpected rain. Except I knew it wasn't raining because I checked. Her hair, which had been perfectly styled in that professional updo thing she does for important events, was coming loose, strands falling around her face in a way that would have been romantic if the circumstances were different. And she wasn't looking at me like I just told her I'd sold her car to buy magic beans. Her voice came out small, tired, nothing like her usual confident tone that could silence a conference room. Why didn't you tell me you own the company? It wasn't an accusation exactly, more like genuine confusion mixed with hurt. And that hit harder than anger would have because I can handle anger. Anger is clean, straightforward, something you can argue against. But hurt is complicated, messy, the kind of thing that requires actual emotional intelligence and mature communication skills that I definitely had somewhere in my repertoire if I could just remember where I'd put them. I patted the couch cushion next to me. An invitation she ignored, choosing instead to stand there in the middle of our living room like she was testifying in court and sitting would somehow weaken her case. Because, sweetheart, I said, trying to find the words that would explain a decision that had made perfect sense to me 3 weeks ago, but now, faced with her smudged makeup and wounded expression seemed maybe less brilliant than I'd originally thought. Sometimes the best way to see a person's character is to step out of the spotlight and watch what they do when they think you're nobody. I meant Gregory obviously, but I could see from her face that she was also processing what this meant about her colleagues, about the way people had treated both of us all evening, about the whole social experiment I'd been conducting without her knowledge or consent. She started to cry, really cry. Not the angry tears that come with yelling matches, but the sad, frustrated ones that somehow feel worse because they're quieter, more genuine. She sank onto the arm of the couch, not quite sitting with me, but not standing anymore either. Her body language screaming exhaustion and emotional overload. "I was just embarrassed," she said, her voice catching on the words like they had sharp edges. "That whole night, I was embarrassed. Of you, of me, of us." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I didn't want people thinking I married you for money, that I slept my way to my position, that everything I've worked for was just because my husband owns the damn company." And there it was, the real issue underneath all of this, the thing I probably should have considered before deciding to play corporate Batman and reveal my secret identity at her office party. Tessa was proud, fiercely independent, the kind of person who'd rather die than have someone think she didn't earn her success through her own merit and hard work. She'd been building her career at this company for 3 years before we even met. Had worked her way up from junior analyst to senior manager through actual competence and dedication. And now everyone she worked with was going to wonder if her promotions had been legitimate or if they'd been gifts from her husband, who happened to own everything. "Fess," I said softly, reaching for her hand, which she let me take even though she was still crying, still processing, still angry in that complicated way that meant we were going to be okay eventually. But the road there was going to involve a lot of talking and probably some more crying. "You earned your position. You're brilliant at what you do and everyone knows it. Gregory was the one who didn't deserve his job, not you." It was true. I'd looked at her performance reviews, her project completions, her client satisfaction ratings, all without her knowing because I tried to keep my personal and professional lives separate right up until they collided spectacularly tonight. She shook her head, tears still falling, and I grabbed the tissue box from the side table, offering it to her like a white flag in our domestic negotiation. "That's not how it's going to look, Marcus. That's not what people are going to say. By Monday morning, the whole office is going to be whispering about how I've been sleeping with the owner's wife." "Wait, that doesn't make sense. Sleeping with the owner while pretending to just be a normal employee." She blew her nose, a honking sound that was somehow both miserable and adorable. "I'm going to be that person, the boss's wife. Everything I do from now on is going to be suspect." I nodded, acknowledging the validity of her concern because she wasn't wrong. Office politics were brutal and people loved a good conspiracy theory more than they loved actual facts. "Don't worry, Tess," I said. And I could feel the joke forming before my brain could stop my mouth, which has always been a problem I should probably work on. "They'll think you run HR by tomorrow morning after your boss's resignation hits LinkedIn." I said it trying to lighten the mood, to inject some levity into this heavy conversation, but I realized about halfway through the sentence that maybe this wasn't the right moment. Her glare could have melted steel, could have cut through titanium, could have vaporized whatever remained of my hope that humor was going to save me from this conversation. Her eyes, still watery from crying, narrowed into slits that promised retribution, possibly involving my favorite gaming console being donated to charity or my craft beer collection mysteriously disappearing. "What?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before storms and volcanic eruptions. "Too soon," I smiled sweetly. The kind of smile that acknowledged I'd just stepped in it, but was committed to the bit anyway, because backing down now would be admitting defeat. And I'd already committed so many crimes against good judgment tonight that one more couldn't hurt. "Maybe a little too soon," I admitted, squeezing her hand. But in my defense, the joke was right there. And you know, I can't resist low-hanging fruit. She pulled her hand away, but I caught the corner of her mouth twitching, fighting against the smile that wanted to break through her anger and hurt. By Monday morning, Gregory's resignation email hit every inbox like a fireworks show, except instead of oohs and oh. It was met with frantic forwarding, screenshot sharing, and the kind of office gossip that usually only happens when someone gets caught doing something truly scandalous in the supply closet. I wasn't even in the office. I work from home most days because what's the point of owning a company if you have to sit in traffic and pretend to enjoy fluorescent lighting? But Liam sent me updates every 15 minutes like he was providing play-by-play commentary for the Super Bowl of corporate drama. Email arrived at 8:47 a.m. His first text read, subject line, "A new chapter." He used the word synergy 3 times in the first paragraph. It's physically painful to read. Followed by break room is packed. Someone brought donuts. This is better than the time Karen from accounting got caught catfishing the intern. And then update, people are printing it out. Printing it like it's a historical document. I saw someone laminating a copy. Sir, they're laminating it. I sat at my home office desk, coffee in hand, reading through Gregory's resignation letter that Clara had forwarded to me for official review, which was corporate speak for, "You need to see this masterpiece of passive-aggressive professional suicide." The letter was exactly what I'd expected, a carefully worded piece of fiction that made it sound like Gregory was leaving to pursue other opportunities and focus on personal growth, with absolutely no mention of the fact that he'd spent an entire evening being condescending to the company owner while said owner was pretending to be a stay-at-home handyman. It was corporate poetry. Really, the way he managed to make getting fired sound like a voluntary journey of self-discovery. The board congratulated me through a flurry of emails that arrived throughout the morning. Each one more enthusiastic than the last. A graceful intervention, the chairman called it, which was a polite way of saying, "Thank God someone finally dealt with that problem." "Long overdue," added another board member who'd apparently been waiting for an excuse to get rid of Gregory for months, but hadn't wanted to deal with the paperwork. They scheduled an emergency meeting for Tuesday to discuss interim leadership, succession planning, and probably to hear the full story because I kept my little party-crashing adventure to myself. And they were definitely curious about how exactly their reclusive majority shareholder had ended up at a branch opening, let alone demolishing the CEO in front of the entire staff. The CFO, Clara, sent a fruit basket to my house, which arrived around noon with a card that simply said, "Worth every penny of the catering budget," and included a bottle of very expensive scotch tucked between the apples and oranges. Because Clara understood that some victories required celebration that went beyond fruit. I texted her a photo of the basket with a thank you message, and she responded with, "The break room has a betting pool on who the interim CEO will be. I'm currently the favorite at 3-1 odds. Should I be concerned?" I told her she should absolutely be concerned, but also flattered, and that I'd talk to her later in the week about potential next steps, which was my way of saying, "Yes, you're probably getting promoted, but let's pretend there's some suspense here." HR, specifically Patricia, the head of HR, who I was 90% sure never slept and instead survived purely on efficiency and the tears of policy violators, sent me a meme, an actual meme. It was that gif of someone walking away from an explosion without looking back, captioned, "Marcus Hale leaving the branch opening 2025 colorized." I didn't even know Patricia knew what memes were, let alone that she had a sense of humor hiding underneath the professional exterior. I responded with a laughing emoji and a note saying, "Please confirm this doesn't violate any HR policies before I share it with the board." And she sent back, "I'll allow it," with a winking emoji that somehow made the whole thing even funnier. But the real aftermath wasn't in the emails or the memes or the office gossip. It was at home in the weird tension that had settled over our house like fog over a harbor, making everything feel slightly off-kilter and uncertain. Tessa had apologized again Sunday morning over coffee and pancakes that I'd made as a peace offering because I've learned that carbs and maple syrup are excellent relationship maintenance tools. She'd woken up with clearer eyes and a calmer demeanor, the kind that comes after a good night's sleep and some emotional processing time. "I'm sorry. I said I was embarrassed of you," she said, pouring syrup with the precision of someone who was trying to focus on something other than difficult emotions. "That came out wrong. I wasn't embarrassed of you. I was embarrassed of the situation, of what people would think, of having my professional life and personal life collide in the most spectacular way possible." She looked up at me, fork hovering over her pancakes. "But I shouldn't have made you feel like you did something wrong by defending yourself. Gregory was being a complete ass. And honestly, someone needed to take him down several pegs. I just wish it hadn't been quite so public." I listened quietly, which was maybe the most mature thing I'd done all weekend because Tessa needed to talk through this and I needed to shut up and let her, which goes against every instinct I have, but is apparently what healthy communication looks like according to the relationship books. Liam keeps leaving on my desk like he's trying to tell me something. Some lessons I've learned over 8 years of marriage and countless smaller disasters. Need silence more than explanations. Need listening more than defending. Need space to breathe rather than immediate solutions. "I get it," I said after she'd finished, after she'd eaten 3 bites of pancake and pushed her plate around nervously waiting for my response. "I should have told you who I was, or at least given you a heads up before I showed up. It wasn't fair to surprise you like that. To put you in a position where you had to find out the same time everyone else did. I meant it too in retrospect, which is always 20/20 and conveniently arrives after you've already made all your mistakes. I could see how my little revenge plot had collateral damage that included my wife's professional reputation and peace of mind." She reached across the table and took my hand, syrup, sticky fingers and all. "Next time you decide to reveal you're secretly Batman or whatever," she said. And I could see the smile starting to break through despite her best efforts to stay serious. "Maybe give me a heads up, like a text that says, 'Hey honey, planning to destroy your boss tonight. Where's something nice? Deal?'" I said, squeezing her hand. Although technically I'm more like Bruce Wayne than Batman since I don't fight crime. I just occasionally humiliate people who deserve it while wearing expensive suits. She laughed at that real laughter that meant we were going to be okay. That this would eventually become one of those stories we told at dinner parties in 10 years. Embellished and exaggerated until it barely resembled what actually happened. The week progressed with a strange mixture of normalcy and chaos. Tessa went to work Monday and reported back that the office was split between people who thought I was a hero for standing up to Gregory. People who thought I was a dramatic attention seeker who could have handled it more professionally, and people who were just excited to have something interesting to talk about besides quarterly reports and the broken coffee machine on the third floor. Her colleagues treated her differently. Not worse necessarily, but different, like she'd suddenly become made of glass or important china that might break if handled incorrectly. Sarah from marketing asked if she should curtsy when she sees me now. Tessa reported over dinner Wednesday night. Her tone somewhere between amused and exasperated. And D. Rarick from sales wanted to know if I could put in a good word about his commission structure, like I have any influence over that. She stabbed at her salad with more force than necessary. Oh, and Jenny from accounting asked if we're hiring because apparently now everyone thinks I'm the secret gateway to employment. I made appropriately sympathetic noises while trying not to laugh because this was exactly what Tessa had been worried about. And I didn't want to seem like I was taking her concerns lightly, even though the image of someone curtsying to my wife in the break room was objectively hilarious. Give it time, I said, which is what you say when you don't have actual solutions, but want to sound wise and supportive. Once they get used to it, once there's new gossip to focus on, it'll settle down. You're still the same person doing the same excellent work. By Thursday, Clara had been officially named interim CEO, and her first act was sending a company-wide email about rebuilding trust and fostering genuine team culture, which was professional speak for the previous guy was a tool, and we're going to do better. She scheduled one-on-ones with every department head, including Tessa, and apparently spent the entire meeting asking about Tessa's ideas for improving operations without once mentioning me or the party or anything related to the drama, which Tessa appreciated more than any explicit reassurance could have provided. Friday afternoon, as I was wrapping up work for the week and contemplating whether I'd earned a beer or if it was still too early for alcohol, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers are usually either spam calls about my car's extended warranty or relatives I've been avoiding, but something made me pick up. Marcus Hale, I answered using my professional voice that I reserve for people who might be important. Mr. Hale, this is Bradley Chun from the Business Chronicle. A young-sounding voice said, and I could hear typing in the background like he was already writing the article while we spoke. I'm doing a piece on leadership styles in modern corporations. And I heard about an interesting incident at your company's recent branch opening. Would you be available for comment? I leaned back in my chair, considering whether talking to a reporter about the Gregory situation was a brilliant PR move or a terrible idea that would haunt me forever. Off the record, I asked because I've dealt with reporters before and I know how this game works. The incident you're referring to was a reminder that leadership is about respect, not hierarchy, about earning your position through competence, rather than assuming it through title. But on the record, you can quote me as saying, Hale Industries is committed to fostering a workplace culture based on mutual respect and genuine achievement. He tried to push for more details for the juicy gossip that would make his article go viral, but I deflected with the skill of someone who's sat through enough board meetings to know how to say nothing while sounding like you said something important. We ended the call with him slightly disappointed and me relieved that I'd managed to navigate that particular minefield without creating more problems. As I left for work, which is to say walked from my home office to the living room because the commute is terrible, but at least there's no traffic, I turned back and saw Tessa sitting on the couch, laptop open, probably reviewing something for Monday's meetings. Next time you invite me to your office events, I said, unable to resist one final callback to the whole mess, just remember I pay the caterer, she groaned. The kind of groan that's 50% annoyance and 50% affection. The sound of someone who's resigned to spending their life with a person who can't resist a good one-liner, even when silence would be the smarter choice. I'm never inviting you to another work event, she said. But she was smiling when she said it, which meant she was lying, which meant we were definitely okay. You're banned. Blacklisted. I'm putting your photo up at security with "Do not admit" written underneath. I winked at her because winking is my signature move when I've said something ridiculous and want to acknowledge it while also committing to the bit. Too late, sweetheart. I own security, too. I'm already on the list as that guy who can go anywhere because he literally owns the building. She threw a couch pillow at me which I deserved and I caught it because my reflexes are surprisingly good for someone who spends most of his day sitting at a desk making financial decisions. And in that moment, with my wife laughing despite herself and the week's chaos finally settling into something resembling normally, I realized something important. Revenge isn't always about rage, about getting even, about making someone pay for their mistakes in the most dramatic way possible. Sometimes revenge is quieter than that. Sometimes it's about showing up when you're not expected, about refusing to be diminished by someone else's arrogance, about standing in a room full of people who underestimated you and letting them realize slowly, painfully, unforgettably that they never knew who they were dealing with in the first place. It's about the moment of recognition in someone's eyes when they understand they've been playing checkers while you were playing chess. That their entire evening of condescension was being observed and catalogued by the one person who had the power to make it mean something. It's about smiling through the insults, letting them pile up like kindling, and then striking the match at exactly the right moment so everyone can watch the fire together. And yeah, maybe I could have handled it more professionally. Could have pulled Gregory aside privately and had a stern conversation about respect and workplace culture. Could have been the bigger person who took the high road and dealt with things through proper channels. But where's the fun in that? Where's the story? Where's the lesson for everyone watching who needed to see that arrogance has consequences? That being a jerk eventually catches up with you. That you can't treat people like they're beneath you just because you think you're standing on top of the mountain when really you're just standing on a hill and the actual mountain is behind you, watching, waiting, taking notes. Because revenge isn't always about rage or destruction or burning bridges just to watch them burn. Sometimes it's about showing up, smiling, being underestimated and misunderstood and dismissed as unimportant. And then at the perfect moment, with perfect timing, in front of the perfect audience, letting everyone realize you're the one who signs the paychecks, owns the building, and has been paying for their artisanal shrimp cocktails all along. And if that makes me petty, well, I'm a petty man with a company, a wife who's only mostly annoyed with me, and a laminated copy of Gregory's resignation letter that Liam framed and hung in the office as a motivational reminder. I can live with that.
That brings this story to an end, and that one was definitely a wild ride. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, let's move into the next story, titled
Christmas morning. My mother-in-law replaced all my daughter's gifts with empty boxes. She doesn't deserve anything. She's not normal. My 10-year-old daughter just smiled. That's okay, Grandma. I have a gift for you too. She handed her an envelope. She opened it. Her hands started trembling. She looked at her husband. How did she do this? Lawrence Wilkins stood in the doorway of his daughter's bedroom, watching Sophie arrange her collection of vintage cameras on the shelf with mathematical precision. Each one had to be exactly 3 inches apart, labels facing forward at the same angle. She was humming softly, a habit she developed when concentrating. At 10 years old, his daughter possessed a mind that worked differently than most, cataloging details, remembering conversations verbatim, seeing patterns where others saw chaos. Dad, you're standing in the observation position again, Sophie said without turning around. That means you want to talk, but you're worried about something. Lawrence smiled despite himself. Her autism spectrum diagnosis had come when she was 5, shortly after her mother, Laura, died. The doctors called it high functioning, but Lawrence never liked that term. Sophie wasn't functioning at anything. She was brilliant, observant, and honest to a fault. She simply experienced the world through a different lens. Just admiring your organization skills, he said, stepping into the room. Listen, kiddo. Grandma Beatrice and Grandpa Douglas are coming for Christmas this year. Sophie's hand stilled on a vintage Polaroid camera. Her shoulders tensed slightly. The only outward sign of her distress. Grandma doesn't like me. That's not true. Dad. Sophie turned, her gray eyes meeting his. You taught me that honesty is important. Grandma Beatrice told me last Easter that I killed her daughter and that I'm not a real person because my brain doesn't work right. She said it at 2:47 p.m. while you were getting drinks from the kitchen. I remember because that's when the grandfather clock chimed. Lawrence felt his jaw tighten. He'd suspected Beatrix's cruelty ran deeper than the occasional barbed comment he'd witnessed, but hearing it confirmed made his blood boil. His late wife Laura had been nothing like her mother. Where Laura was warm and accepting, Beatrice Miranda was cold and judgmental. Where Laura celebrated differences, Beatrice demanded conformity. Why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. Because you already look sad when you look at me sometimes. I didn't want to make it worse. Sophie turned back to her cameras. Besides, I've been documenting it. You taught me that documentation is power. You're a documentary filmmaker. I'm following your example. Lawrence, move closer. What do you mean documenting? Sophie pulled a small voice recorder from her desk drawer. I record things, conversations, dates, times. I have 17 separate incidents recorded over the past 3 years. Would you like to hear them? As Lawrence listened to his daughter play back clip after clip of Beatrix Venom, calling Sophie broken, defective, God's punishment for Laura's sins, he felt something shift inside him. He'd spent the 5 years since Laura's death, trying to be both parents, trying to shield Sophie from a world that didn't understand her. He'd been patient with Beatrice, making excuses for her grief, hoping she'd eventually accept Sophie. That patience had been a mistake. "Play the one from last Christmas," Lawrence said, his voice flat. Sophie's fingers found the right file immediately. Beatrix's voice filled the room, sharp and cutting. "Douglas, look at her rocking back and forth like an animal. This is what Laura left us with. A defective creature that can't even make eye contact. We should have institutionalized her when we had the chance." Lawrence closed his eyes. He'd been in the next room that day preparing Christmas dinner. He'd had no idea. "There's more. Sophie said she talks to Grandpa Douglas about taking me away from you. She says you're not capable of raising me properly because you work too much. She's been calling people lawyers, I think. She mentions custody proceedings in 6 different recordings." The anger in Lawrence's chest crystallized into something colder, more calculated. Beatrice Miranda wasn't just a grieving mother taking her pain out on an innocent child. She was actively trying to destroy their lives. To rip Sophie away from the only parent she had left. "Sophie," he said carefully. "How would you feel about turning this documentation into a project? Something more comprehensive?" His daughter's eyes lit up with the same spark Laura's used to have when she was onto a good story. "What kind of project?" "The kind that protects us. The kind that makes sure Grandma can never hurt you again." Over the next 2 weeks, Lawrence and Sophie worked together in a way that reminded him painfully of the documentaries he used to make with Laura. Before Sophie was born, they'd been a team. Lawrence behind the camera, Laura conducting interviews. Both of them chasing stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Laura's death from an aneurysm when Sophie was 3 had ended that chapter of his life. He'd focused on corporate work after that, safer projects that paid the bills and kept him close to home. But this was different. This mattered. Sophie's recordings were damning, but Lawrence needed more. He needed context, evidence, a story that would make Beatrix's cruelty undeniable. He started with Douglas Miranda, his father-in-law. The man had always been kind to Sophie, albeit in a distant, uncomfortable way. Lawrence suspected Douglas was simply weak, dominated by his wife's stronger personality. A phone call confirmed it. "Lawrence, I don't know what you want me to say." Douglas's voice sounded tired over the phone. "Beatrice has been difficult since we lost Laura. She fixates on things right now. She's convinced that Sophie needs a different environment." "By different environment, you mean away from me?" Silence. "Then she's contacted a family lawyer. She's building a case that you're neglectful. Working long hours, leaving Sophie with babysitters, exposing her to unconventional ideas. She's going to petition for grandparents' rights. Sophie is happy, healthy, and thriving," Lawrence said, keeping his voice. "Even any judge would see that. I know. I've tried to tell her, but Beatrice doesn't listen to me. She never has." Douglas paused. "I'm sorry, Lawrence. For what it's worth, I think you're a wonderful father and Sophie is a remarkable child. Laura would be proud." After hanging up, Lawrence sat in his editing studio surrounded by hard drives and equipment. Laura smiled at him from a framed photo on his desk taken a week before she died holding baby Sophie. Both of them laughing at something he said behind the camera. "I won't let her take our daughter," he said to the photo. "Not now. Not ever." Sophie appeared in the doorway holding her tablet. "Dad, I found something." Grandma Beatrice posted on her Facebook page about praying for guidance about a difficult family situation. Her church friends are commenting. They don't know she's talking about me, but she's building a narrative. "What kind of narrative? That you're an unfit parent? That I'm suffering? That she's a concerned grandmother trying to help?" Sophie's voice remained emotionless, but Lawrence could see the tension in her small shoulders. "She's creating a public record of concern. It's strategic." Lawrence looked at his daughter, amazed once again by her perception. "You're right. It is strategic. So, we need to be more strategic," Sophie said. She sat down in Laura's old chair, the one he could never bring himself to move. "I have an idea about Christmas." Lawrence leaned forward. "I'm listening. Grandma thinks I don't understand social games because I'm autistic. She thinks I don't notice things, don't remember things, don't feel things." Sophie met his eyes. "We should let her keep thinking that, and then we should show her exactly how wrong she is." A slow smile spread across Lawrence's face. His daughter might think differently, but she thought brilliantly. "Tell me your idea." As Sophie outlined her plan, Lawrence began to see the shape of something bigger. This wasn't just about defending themselves against Beatrix's custody attempt. This was about ending her cruelty permanently, about making sure she could never hurt Sophie again. And his daughter, the child Beatrice called broken and defective, was going to orchestrate the whole thing. The week before Christmas, Beatrice Miranda called to confirm their visit. Lawrence put her on speaker so Sophie could hear. "We'll arrive Christmas Eve around 6, Beatrice said, her voice carrying that particular tone of forced cheerfulness that made Lawrence's skin crawl. "I'm bringing Sophie some special gifts this year. Things to help her develop better social skills." "That's very thoughtful," Lawrence said neutrally. "Yes. Well, someone needs to take an interest in her development. Douglas and I have been discussing it extensively. The child needs structure, discipline, perhaps more intensive therapy." She paused. "We've actually been consulting with specialists about the best approaches for children with her condition." Lawrence watched Sophie's face remain impassive as she listened. She was recording. Of course, they recorded everything. "Now, Sophie's doing very well with her current therapist." Lawrence said, "Well, we'll see. Douglas and I want what's best for our granddaughter, even if that means making difficult decisions." The threat was barely veiled. "We'll see you Christmas Eve. Oh, and Lawrence, please try to make the house presentable. First impressions matter, especially in situations like these." After she hung up, Sophie stopped the recording and added it to her growing file. "She's planning something for Christmas." "I know, so are we." They spent the next few days preparing. Lawrence reviewed all of Sophie's recordings, organizing them chronologically, adding context from his own observations. He interviewed Sophie on camera about each incident, letting her precise memory and honest delivery speak for itself. He compiled social media posts from Beatrice, emails she'd sent, text messages where she'd criticized his parenting. He documented Sophie's medical records, report cards, therapy progress notes, all evidence of a child who was thriving despite her grandmother's assessment. But the centerpiece of their strategy was something else entirely, something Sophie had discovered while doing what she did best, noticing patterns. "Dad, look at this," Sophie said 3 days before Christmas, pulling up a spreadsheet on her computer. "I tracked Grandma's Facebook posts about her charity work. She runs a foundation called Miranda's Angels that supposedly helps disabled children. I know about that. It's in your grandmother's name. She started it after your mom died, right? But look at the finances." Sophie pulled up tax documents she'd somehow accessed. The foundation takes in about $200,000 a year in donations, but it only distributes about $30,000 to actual programs. The rest goes to administrative costs. Lawrence leaned closer. "How did you get these?" "They're public records. Form 990s. Anyone can access them." Sophie pulled up more documents. "But here's the interesting part. The foundation pays Grandma a salary of $85,000 a year as executive director. Grandpa Douglas gets $40,000 as treasurer. The rest goes to office expenses, travel, and conferences." "But Dad, there is no office." "I checked the address. It's their house and the conferences she attends. Look at the locations." "Lawrence, scan the list. Paris, Rome, Bali, Tokyo. She's using a charity for disabled children to fund her lifestyle." Sophie said. "She talks about how tragic it is that kids like me exist and then she profits from it. That's why she posts about me on social media. I'm her inspiration story. The broken granddaughter that motivates her charitable work." Lawrence sat back stunned. He'd known Beatrice was cruel, but this was something else. This was systematic exploitation. "Sophie, this is fraud." Sophie finished. "Or at least unethical. The foundation is legitimate, but she's using it wrong. And she's built her entire social reputation on being an advocate for disabled children while calling her own granddaughter defective in private. Can you document all of this?" "Already did. I have a complete analysis with source documents. Want to see?" As Lawrence reviewed his daughter's work, detailed, thorough, devastating, he realized that Beatrice had underestimated Sophie in the most fatal way possible. She'd assumed that because Sophie's brain worked differently, it worked worse. She'd never considered that different might mean better at certain things, like pattern recognition, like documentation, like seeing through lies. "We're going to need one more thing," Lawrence said slowly. "We need her to reveal herself completely on camera. In a way she can't deny or explain away." Sophie nodded. "That's where the Christmas presents come in. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Tell me anyway. We let her do something really bad, something undeniable. We give her the opportunity to show everyone exactly who she is." Sophie's voice was calm, analytical. "I can handle it, Dad. I've been handling her for years. But this time, the whole world will see. Lawrence wanted to protect his daughter from more of Beatrix's cruelty. Every instinct screamed against deliberately exposing her to it. But Sophie was right. The only way to end this permanently was to let Beatrice reveal her true nature in a way that couldn't be explained away or excused. Okay, he said finally, but we do it my way with safeguards. And the moment it goes too far, you stop it. I know. Sophie smiled slightly. Dad, I'm not scared of Grandma. I used to be when I was little, but now I understand her. She's just a person who needs to feel superior to feel happy. And people like that make mistakes when they think they're winning. Lawrence pulled his daughter into a hug. She tolerated it for exactly 15 seconds, her usual limit, before pulling away. But she was smiling. Let's finish the preparations, he said. Christmas is in 3 days, and your grandmother has no idea what's coming. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow and the scent of pine from the tree Lawrence and Sophie had decorated together. They'd spent the day preparing the house, cooking Laura's traditional recipes, and making final technical checks on their equipment. Hidden cameras were positioned in the living room, dining room, and near the Christmas tree. Audio recorders were placed strategically. Lawrence's professional equipment was ready to capture everything in high definition. Sophie had wrapped empty boxes in festive paper and placed them under the tree with her name on them, just as Lawrence had instructed. The real presents. Thoughtful gifts that Lawrence had carefully chosen based on Sophie's current interests in vintage photography and astronomy were hidden in his bedroom closet. Are you sure about this? Lawrence asked for the 10th time as they waited for Beatrix and Douglas to arrive. Dad, stop asking. I'm sure. Sophie adjusted her sweater, a red one with a reindeer that Laura had bought years ago. She wore it every Christmas. Remember, I need you to stay calm no matter what Grandma does. If you lose your temper, it won't work. I'll stay calm. Promise. I promise. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Douglas stood on the porch holding a poinsettia. His kind face weathered by years of deference to his wife. Behind him, Beatrice carried wrapped presents and wore an expression of practiced grandmotherly warmth that didn't reach her eyes. Merry Christmas, Beatrice said, sweeping into the house. She barely glanced at Sophie, who stood politely near the stairs. Douglas, put those packages under the tree. Lawrence, the house looks adequate. You've made an effort at least. Merry Christmas, Beatrice. Douglas. Lawrence took their coats. Dinner will be ready in about an hour. Douglas approached Sophie cautiously. Hello, sweetheart. How are you? I'm well. Thank you, Grandpa Douglas. How was your drive? Sophie's responses were perfectly appropriate, her tone measured. She'd been practicing social scripts with her therapist for years. Oh, the roads were fine. Sophie, stand up straight, Beatrice interrupted. And look at your grandfather when he's speaking to you. We've discussed proper manners. Sophie adjusted her posture slightly, but didn't make eye contact, something her autism made extremely difficult and uncomfortable. Lawrence washed Beatrix's lips thin with disapproval. The evening proceeded with tense civility. Douglas made genuine attempts at conversation with Sophie, asking about school and her hobbies. Beatrice maintained a facade of grandmotherly interest while making small, cutting remarks that Sophie absorbed without reaction. She's still doing that odd humming thing, Beatrice commented to Douglas as if Sophie weren't there. So disconcerting. I find it soothing, Douglas said quietly. Laura used to hum the same way when she was concentrating. Beatrix's expression hardened. Laura was normal. This child is nothing like my daughter. Lawrence gripped his wine glass tighter but said nothing. The cameras were recording. Let Beatrice talk. After dinner, they settled in the living room. The Christmas tree lights cast a warm glow over the presents beneath it. Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor, arranging cookies on a plate with her characteristic precision. Well, Beatrice said, setting down her coffee cup with a sharp click. Should we open presents? I'm particularly excited about what we brought for Sophie this year. Christmas morning is traditional in this house, Lawrence said. We LL open them tomorrow. Nonsense. We're here now. Besides, I'd like to see Sophie's reaction to her gifts. Beatrix's smile was predatory. I put a lot of thought into them. Douglas shifted uncomfortably. Beatrice, maybe we should wait. Douglas, please. Beatrice stood and walked to the tree. She began pulling out the presents with Sophie's name on them, the empty boxes Lawrence and Sophie had planted. Here we are. Sophie, dear, come open your presents from Grandma. Sophie looked at Lawrence, who nodded slightly. She approached the tree with her characteristic precise movements, sitting down in front of the pile of wrapped boxes. Beatrice settled back into her chair, Douglas beside her looking increasingly uneasy. Go ahead, dear. Open them. Sophie carefully unwrapped the first box, her movements methodical. She removed the paper, opened the box, and looked inside at nothing. No reaction crossed her face. She set it aside, and reached for the second box. "What is it, Sophie?" Beatrice asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What did Grandma get you?" Sophie opened the second box empty. Then the third empty, fourth, fifth, sixth, all empty. She lined them up in a neat row, arranging them by size, her face serene and untroubled. Lawrence felt his hands clench into fists. He wanted to throw Beatrice out of his house to scream at her for her cruelty, but he'd promised Sophie he'd stay calm. This was part of the plan. "Sophie," Beatrice said, leaning forward. "Don't you have anything to say? Aren't you disappointed?" Sophie looked up at her grandmother, her gray eyes clear and direct. "Why would I be disappointed, Grandma?" "Because there's nothing in the boxes, you silly girl. Don't you understand? There are no presents for you." "I understand," Sophie said calmly. "And how does that make you feel?" Sophie tilted her head, appearing to consider the question. "I feel that this is consistent with your previous behavior patterns. You've told me 17 times over the past 3 years that I don't deserve nice things because I'm not normal. This is you demonstrating that belief through action. It's actually very predictable." Beatrix's expression faltered for just a moment before hardening into anger. "How dare you speak to me like that? You ungrateful broken little Beatrix," Douglas said sharply. "That's enough." "No, it's not enough." Beatrice stood, her carefully maintained facade cracking. "This is exactly what I've been talking about, Douglas. Look at her. No emotion, no tears, just sitting there like a robot analyzing everything. She's not normal. She's not right. And Lawrence is raising her to be even worse, filling her head with his liberal ideas about acceptance and diversity. This child needs discipline, structure, intensive treatment. She needs to be somewhere that can handle her properly." "You mean institutionalized," Lawrence said quietly. "That's what you want, isn't it? You want Sophie locked away somewhere you never have to see her. I want her to get proper help. And I want you to face the reality that you're not equipped to raise a child with special needs. You're gone half the time working on your little projects, leaving her with strangers. A child like this needs constant supervision, constant correction." "A child like what?" Sophie's voice cut through Beatrix's rant. "Say it, Grandma. You've said it before in private. Say what you really think about me." Beatrix's face flushed red. "You're defective. You're broken. You're the punishment for Laura choosing to have a child at her age with her health problems. God took her and left us with you. And I've had to watch Douglas and Lawrence pretend that you're something you're not. You're not special. You're not gifted. You're damaged. And you'll never be normal. And Laura died for nothing." "Beatrice." Douglas was on his feet, his face white. "Stop it. Stop it right now." But Beatrice was beyond stopping. Years of controlled venom poured out in a torrent. "She doesn't deserve presents. She doesn't deserve happiness. She doesn't deserve this family's name. Laura was perfect and this thing replaced her. That's enough." Lawrence's voice was cold and hard. "Douglas, I think you and Beatrice should leave." "Oh, we're leaving," Beatrice said, grabbing her purse. "And we're not coming back. Not until you face reality about that child. We're filing for custody. Lawrence, we've already spoken to lawyers. A judge will see that you're unfit, that she needs professional care." "Grandma," Sophie said softly. She stood up, brushing wrapping paper from her lap. "I have a gift for you, too." She held out an envelope, her hand steady. Beatrice looked at it suspiciously. "What is this?" "It's a Christmas present from me. You should open it." Beatrice snatched the envelope and tore it open. Inside was a USB drive and a single sheet of paper. As she read, the color drained from her face. Her hands began to tremble. The letter was simple. "Dear Grandma Beatrice, this USB drive contains 47 audio recordings of you saying cruel things about me over the past 3 years. Video documentation of tonight's events. A complete financial analysis of Miranda's Angels Foundation, including tax discrepancies. Social media posts where you used me as inspiration for donations while calling me defective in private documentation of your custody plans and conversations with lawyers. Copies of all materials have been sent to your church's board of directors, the board of Miranda's Angels Foundation, the IRS regarding foundation irregularities, Child Protective Services to preempt your custody filing, your social circle, and book club. Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoy your gift as much as I enjoyed mine. Sophie Wilkins." Beatrice looked at Douglas, her expression stricken. "How did she? This is impossible. She's just a child. She's not capable. She's autistic, not stupid," Douglas said quietly. He'd moved to stand beside Sophie, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. And you've underestimated her for the last time. You knew about this? Beatrice turned on her husband. You helped her? I didn't know the specifics, but yes, I knew Lawrence and Sophie were documenting your behavior, and I told them I wouldn't stand in their way. Douglas's voice was steady, stronger than Lawrence had ever heard it. What you did tonight, Beatrice, replacing a child's Christmas presents with empty boxes. That's evil. That's not grief. That's not concern. That's cruelty for cruelty's sake. She's not really a child, Douglas. She doesn't feel things like normal children. Stop. Sophie's voice was quiet but firm. I feel everything, Grandma. I just don't show it the way you expect. When you say I'm broken, I feel sad. When you tell me I killed my mother, I feel guilty even though I know it's not true. When you give me empty boxes, I feel hurt. I felt all of it every single time. I just learned not to show you because my reactions make you happy. You like seeing me hurt. Tears were streaming down Sophie's face now, though her voice remained controlled. But what you never understood is that feeling things and showing things are different. And being autistic doesn't mean I can't document, analyze, and respond to patterns of abuse. It actually makes me better at it. I remember everything, Grandma. Every word, every date, every time you told me I wasn't worth loving. Lawrence moved to his daughter's side as she wiped her tears with precise, controlled movements. I think you should leave now, Beatrice. And if you attempt to file for custody, we'll present all of this evidence to the court. If you contact us again, we'll seek a restraining order. If you continue to run Miranda's Angels the way you have been, the IRS will investigate based on Sophie's findings. It's your choice. Beatrice stood frozen, the letter clutched in her shaking hands. For the first time in Lawrence's memory, she looked small, powerless. You can't do this, she whispered. I'm her grandmother. I have rights. You have the right to leave, Douglas said. Now, as Beatrice stumbled toward the door, Douglas lingered for a moment. He looked at Sophie with something like awe and sorrow mixed together. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For all of it, for not stopping her sooner, for being weak. You're not weak, Grandpa Douglas, Sophie said. You're conflict avoidant and you've been in a relationship with a narcissistic personality for 43 years. That's different. Despite everything, Douglas smiled slightly. You're so much like your mother. She was brave, too. He looked at Lawrence. Take care of each other. And if you need anything, testimony for the custody case, financial support, anything, you call me. Thank you, Douglas. After they left, the house fell silent except for the soft crackling of the fireplace. Sophie sank onto the couch, the adrenaline clearly leaving her system. Her hands were shaking now, her breathing rapid. Hey, Lawrence said softly, sitting beside her. You okay? That was hard, Sophie admitted, letting her think she'd won for a minute, watching her be cruel, not reacting. She looked up at him. Did I do okay? You did more than okay. You were incredible. But Sophie, you don't have to hold everything in. Not with me. If you want to cry or scream or the dam broke. Sophie turned and buried her face in his shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs that she'd held back for years. All the times Beatrice had hurt her. All the cruel words and dismissive gestures. All the pain she'd internalized and documented and analyzed, it all came pouring out. Lawrence held his daughter and let her cry, his own tears falling into her hair. After a long time, her sobs quieted into hiccups, then into deep shuddering breaths. I miss Mom. Sophie whispered. I know I don't remember her much, but I miss her. And Grandma made me feel like it was my fault she was gone. It wasn't your fault, sweetheart. Mom loved you so much. She'd be so proud of you. I'm tired of being strong and different and special. Sometimes I just want to be regular. I know, but you know what? Regular is overrated. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. They sat in silence for a while. Sophie's breathing gradually returning to normal. Finally, she sat up, wiping her face with her sleeve. Can we open my real presents now? Lawrence laughed. Yeah, let me get them. He returned with the gifts from his closet, a vintage Hasselblad camera he'd found at an estate sale, a telescope for her growing astronomy obsession, and a leather-bound journal for her documentation projects. Sophie's face lit up with genuine joy as she opened each one. These are perfect, she said, turning the camera over in her hands with reverence. Dad, they're really perfect. I know. I pay attention. He smiled. Want to take some pictures? They spent the rest of the evening doing what they did best, being a team. Sophie photographed the Christmas tree, the empty boxes lined up like evidence, the snow falling outside. Lawrence showed her how to adjust the vintage camera's settings, and together they documented a Christmas that had started with cruelty but ended with victory. Around midnight, as Sophie was finally getting drowsy, her tablet chimed. She checked it and smiled. "What is it?" Lawrence asked. "Grandpa Douglas sent me an email. He's filing for divorce. He says he should have done it years ago, but watching me stand up to Grandma made him realize he could, too." She looked up at Lawrence. "Do you think that's because of me?" "I think it's because you showed him what courage looks like. Even when you're scared, even when you're different, even when the world tells you you're not enough, you can still stand up for yourself." "I had help," Sophie said. "I had you. We had each other. That's what family is supposed to be." Sophie set her tablet aside and curled up against him. "Dad, yeah. Can we do something with all that evidence? Like, make a real documentary about it. About what it's like when people are mean to kids like me and how we can fight back." Lawrence looked down at his daughter, her brilliant mind, already planning her next project. "I think that's a great idea, but maybe we take a few weeks off first. Enjoy the holidays. Be a regular family for a while." "We're not a regular family," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "We're better." Lawrence had to agree. New Year's arrived with both resolution and revelation. The documentation Sophie and Lawrence had compiled became the foundation for something bigger than either of them had initially planned. Beatrix's attempts to contact them through lawyers stopped when Douglas confirmed he'd testified to Child Protective Services about his ex-wife's behavior. The custody case never materialized, but the ripple effects of Christmas night were just beginning. The board of Miranda's Angels Foundation called an emergency meeting on December 28. Lawrence knew this because Douglas, who was now actively cooperative, forwarded him the email chain. The board members had received Sophie's financial analysis and were horrified to discover how their donations had been misused. They're voting to remove Beatrice from the foundation. Douglas explained during a phone call while Sophie listened on speaker. "The IRS has opened an investigation. It might not result in criminal charges, but her reputation is destroyed." "How is she handling it?" Lawrence asked, though he wasn't sure he cared badly. "She's telling everyone that you and Sophie orchestrated some kind of elaborate conspiracy against her. That Sophie's autism makes her devious and manipulative. That you coached her." Sophie made a disgusted sound. "Even now, she can't take responsibility." "No," Douglas said sadly, "she can't. But the truth is out there now. People are listening to those recordings. They're seeing her Facebook posts in a new light. The women from her church group have stopped calling. She's being held accountable finally." After hanging up, Lawrence watched his daughter return to her camera collection, arranging and rearranging with focused intensity. She'd been different since Christmas, more confident, less willing to mask her autism traits in public. It was as if standing up to Beatrice had freed something inside her. "Dad," she said without looking up. "I've been thinking about that documentary idea. And I want to do it, but not just about Grandma. About all of it. About what it's like being autistic in a world that treats different as bad. About how adults underestimate kids. About fighting back against people who hurt you." She turned to face him. "Would you help me make it?" Lawrence felt his chest tighten with pride. "Of course, but it's a big project. It'll take time, research, interviews." "I know. I've already started outlining it." She pulled up a document on her tablet showing a detailed production plan that would put most film students to shame. "I thought we could start with my story, then interview other kids who've dealt with similar things. Not just autistic kids. Any kid who's been told they're not good enough." "That's ambitious. You always said the best documentaries are ambitious." Sophie smiled. "Besides, I have you and I'm a pretty good researcher." "The best." Lawrence agreed. They spent January planning. Sophie reached out to autism advocacy groups, support forums for families dealing with toxic relatives, organizations that worked with neurodivergent children. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of parents wanted to share their stories. Autistic teens and adults volunteered to be interviewed. Even some professionals, therapists, educators, legal advocates offered their expertise. The project grew from a small family documentary into something that could help thousands of people. Lawrence secured funding through his professional network and a small grant from a disability rights organization. By February, they were filming. Sophie was a natural on camera. Her direct communication style and analytical mind made complex ideas accessible. When she interviewed other autistic kids, she had an immediate rapport that Lawrence couldn't replicate. She understood their communication styles, their sensory needs, their ways of seeing the world. One interview in particular stayed with Lawrence, a 15-year-old named Marcus, who'd been bullied by his own stepfather for years because of his ADHD and processing disorder. The stepfather had called him lazy, stupid, Worthless. Marcus had attempted suicide twice before his mother finally left and sought help. How did you survive it? Sophie asked him. Her camera steady. I documented everything, Marcus said. Like you did. I recorded the things he said. I kept a journal. And one day, I showed it all to my school counselor. She helped my mom see what was really happening. Do you think documentation is power? Sophie asked. I think truth is power, Marcus replied. Documentation is just how we preserve truth when people try to deny it. Sophie included that exchange in the documentary's central section on resilience and resistance. She was building a narrative about children who refused to accept the labels cruel adults placed on them, who fought back with intelligence and evidence rather than just emotion. By March, the footage was extensive enough to start editing. Lawrence and Sophie worked side by side in his studio, crafting a story that was both deeply personal and universally resonant. They titled it Different Doesn't Mean Defective. The climax of the documentary was Christmas night. Lawrence had edited the footage into a devastating 8-minute sequence. Beatrix's cruelty, Sophie's calm response, the envelope reveal, Beatrix's breakdown. It was uncomfortable to watch, but undeniable in its impact. Are you sure you want this public? Lawrence asked Sophie as they reviewed the final cut. Once it's out there, people will know our story. Your story? I want it public, Sophie said firmly. Because somewhere there's another kid like me being told they're broken by someone who's supposed to love them. And maybe if they see this, they'll know they're not alone. They'll know they can fight back. You're very brave. I'm autistic, Sophie corrected. Which means I see things logically. Keeping this private protects Grandma. Making it public protects other kids. The logic is simple. Lawrence hugged her, marveling once again at her clarity of purpose. Laura would have been so proud. They released the documentary online in April, free for anyone to watch. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within a week, it had been viewed over 1 million times. News outlets picked up the story. Advocacy groups shared it widely. Parents thanked them for giving voice to their struggles. Autistic adults shared their own stories of childhood trauma and resilience. And the death threats started arriving. They came through email, social media, anonymous messages. People angry that Sophie had exploited her grandmother. People who believed autistic children should be institutionalized. People who saw Sophie's intelligence as threatening or unnatural. Some people hate what they don't understand, Lawrence explained to Sophie as they reviewed the threats with a detective friend who specialized in cybercrime. And some people hate being shown their own cruelty. Like Grandma, Sophie said. Like Grandma. But for every hateful message, there were 100 positive ones. Children thanking Sophie for making them feel less alone. Parents asking for advice on how to protect their neurodivergent kids. Educators requesting permission to show the documentary in schools. The foundation board of Miranda's Angels reached out in May. They'd reorganized completely, removing Beatrice and restructuring their finances. They wanted to know if Sophie would be interested in joining their youth advisory board. They want my input on programs for autistic kids, Sophie told Lawrence reading the email. They're offering a stipend, too. For my time and expertise. What do you think? Sophie considered it carefully, her face showing the concentration Lawrence had come to recognize as deep processing. I think Grandma created that foundation to make herself feel good about having a disabled granddaughter. She profited from other people's sympathy while treating me like garbage. If I join the board, I can help make sure it actually helps kids like me instead of just enriching adults. That's very mature of you. No, Sophie said, it's strategic. I'm turning Grandma's weapon into my tool. There's a difference. She accepted the position. Douglas visited in June, looking healthier than Lawrence had ever seen him. The divorce was finalized and he'd moved into a small condo near the lake. He brought Sophie a vintage Leica camera as a belated birthday present. Your mother loved photography, too, he said as Sophie examined the camera with reverent hands. She had an eye for finding beauty in unexpected places. You have that same gift. Thank you, Grandpa Douglas. I also wanted to tell you both that I'm testifying in a case against Beatrice. The IRS investigation found evidence of intentional fraud with the foundation funds. She might face charges. Lawrence felt a complicated mix of emotions. Despite everything, he didn't take pleasure in Beatrix's downfall. He just wanted her out of their lives. How do you feel about that? He asked Douglas. Relieved, Douglas said honestly. I spent 43 years making excuses for her behavior, protecting her from consequences. I enabled her cruelty by staying silent. If I'd spoken up sooner, maybe Laura would have set boundaries with her before. He trailed off, unable to finish. Before Mom died, Sophie supplied. Grandpa Douglas, Mom's death wasn't your fault. It was a brain aneurysm. The doctors said it was congenital, something she was born with. Nobody could have prevented it. I know, but I wonder if the stress of dealing with her mother contributed. Beatrice was already critical of Laura's decision to have a child. She said it was selfish, irresponsible. Laura and I argued about it before you were born. This was news to Lawrence. I didn't know that. Laura didn't want you to know. She was trying to protect you from Beatrix's toxicity even then. Douglas smiled sadly. My daughter was so much like Sophie. She saw the best in people even when they didn't deserve it. But she was also strong when it mattered. She would have stood up to her mother eventually. She just ran out of time. Sophie moved closer to her grandfather. Grandpa Douglas, do you blame me for Mom's death? God, no, sweetheart. Never. Douglas pulled her into a hug that she tolerated for longer than usual. You're the best part of Laura that's left in the world. And watching you stand up to Beatrice was like watching Laura finally get the chance to do what she never could. You made me proud. You made me brave. After Douglas left, Sophie was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, Dad, I want to visit Mom's grave. They hadn't been since the anniversary of Laura's death in March. Lawrence nodded. Okay. Want to go now? They drove to the cemetery in comfortable silence. Sophie brought her new camera and the vintage Hasselblad Lawrence had given her for Christmas. At Laura's grave, she arranged flowers with characteristic precision and then began photographing the headstone from different angles. I'm taking pictures for the documentary, she explained. For the epilogue, I want to show that the people who hurt us don't get to define our story. We define it ourselves. Lawrence watched his daughter work, marveling at her resilience. She'd faced cruelty from someone who should have loved her. And instead of breaking, she'd documented, analyzed, and fought back. She'd turned her pain into purpose. Mom would be proud of you, he said. I know, Sophie replied simply. I can feel it sometimes, like she's watching. Do you think that's weird? No, I think that's love. They spent an hour at the cemetery. Sophie taking photos while Lawrence told stories about Laura, their first date, the day they'd started their production company, the moment they'd learned they were having a baby. Sophie listened intently, cataloging every detail the way she did everything. Dad, she said as they were leaving, do you think Grandma will ever apologize? Honestly, no. People like Beatrice don't apologize. They see themselves as victims even when they're the aggressors. That's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm. Sophie climbed into the car. I don't need her apology anyway. I have something better. What's that? Truth. Documentation. Victory. She smiled. And you? The documentary continued to gain traction throughout the summer. Educational institutions began using it in training programs for teachers working with neurodivergent students. Therapy practices recommended it to families. It was submitted to film festivals and won several awards for short-form documentary. In August, a publisher reached out about turning the story into a book. Sophie was intrigued but insisted on maintaining creative control. I'll write it, she told the publisher during their video call, Lawrence sitting beside her for support. I'll tell my own story in my own words, but I want final approval on everything. You're 10 years old, the publisher said, not unkindly. Perhaps your father could co-author. I'm almost 11, Sophie corrected. And I've been documenting my experiences for years. I have extensive notes, recordings, and analysis. My father can help with editing and production logistics, but the words are mine. If that's not acceptable, we'll find another publisher. The publisher agreed to her terms. Sophie spent September outlining her book, creating chapter breakdowns and thematic structures that impressed even Lawrence with their sophistication. She was determined to make it more than just her story. She wanted it to be a resource for other neurodivergent children facing similar challenges. I'm calling it Empty Boxes, she announced, because that's what Grandma gave me. But it's also a metaphor. People see autistic kids as empty boxes sometimes. Like we're just containers waiting to be filled with their expectations. But we're not empty. We're full of our own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. We're just different boxes. That's brilliant, Lawrence said. I know, Sophie replied without arrogance. I'm good at metaphors. It's an autistic trait. We often think in patterns and symbols. The book contract was signed in October. Sophie would have creative control with Lawrence serving as a project manager and editor. The advance was substantial enough to fund Sophie's college education and then some. We should donate some of this, Sophie said, reviewing the contract to autism advocacy organizations and to Miranda's Angels now that it's actually helping people. That's generous of you. It's strategic, Sophie corrected. Money creates credibility. If I'm going to be an advocate for neurodivergent kids, I need to support the infrastructure that helps them. Plus, it'll really annoy Grandma to see me succeed with the same foundation she exploited. Lawrence laughed. His daughter's combination of compassion and calculated justice never ceased to amaze him. In November, Beatrice was formally charged with fraud related to Miranda's Angels. The case made local news and several of her former society friends gave interviews expressing shock and disappointment. Beatrice released a statement claiming she was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by her mentally unstable granddaughter. The statement backfired spectacularly. Autism advocacy groups rallied around Sophie, condemning Beatrix's ableist language. The documentary's viewership spiked again. Sophie's publisher moved up the book's release date to capitalize on the renewed interest. "Grandma's trying to hurt me, but she's just making me more famous," Sophie observed. "It's actually kind of funny." "Does it bother you?" Lawrence asked. "What's she saying?" Sophie considered the question with her characteristic thoroughness. "It bothers me that she still thinks being autistic makes me less capable or less credible. It bothers me that she weaponizes my neurodivergence to dismiss valid criticisms of her behavior. But it doesn't bother me personally. I know who I am. She doesn't get to define that." "You're very wise for 11. I'm autistic," Sophie said again. "I've spent my whole life analyzing social patterns because they don't come naturally to me. I've made a study of human behavior. Grandma's behavior is textbook narcissism. Deflect, deny, project blame onto others. It's predictable." The trial was set for January. Douglas testified about years of financial irregularities and Beatrix's admission to him that she viewed the foundation as payment for having to tolerate Sophie's existence. His testimony was damning and specific. Sophie and Lawrence attended the trial but didn't testify. The evidence spoke for itself. Tax documents, recordings, emails, witness statements. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Beatrice was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud and sentenced to 18 months in prison plus restitution. As the verdict was read, she stood rigid and furious, refusing to show remorse. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around Lawrence and Sophie. Sophie had prepared a statement with her therapist's help. "I didn't do this for revenge," she said, reading from a card. "I did it because documentation and truth are powerful tools against abuse. People who hurt children, whether through physical abuse, emotional abuse, or financial exploitation, need to face consequences. My grandmother taught me that being different is something to be ashamed of. But I learned that being different can also mean being strong enough to stand up to people who hurt you. I hope other kids in similar situations see this and know they're not alone. They can document. They can speak up. They can win." The clip went viral. Sophie's book pre-orders tripled and Lawrence watched his daughter handle media attention with the same analytical clarity she brought to everything else. "How are you really doing?" he asked that night as they sat in their living room, the Christmas tree already up and decorated. "I'm tired," Sophie admitted. "All the attention is overwhelming. People keep touching me without asking, which I hate. And everyone wants me to be some kind of inspiration, which feels weird. You don't have to be anyone's inspiration. You can just be Sophie." "But that's the thing, Dad. I am just being Sophie. I did what made logical sense. I documented abuse, preserved evidence, and presented it when the time was right. I'm not exceptional for doing that. I'm just autistic, which means I'm really good at pattern recognition and systematic documentation. Maybe that's what makes you exceptional." Sophie leaned against him. "Do you think Mom would be happy about all this? About the documentary and the book and everything? I think Mom would be thrilled that you're using your gifts to help others, and I think she'd be proud of how you stood up for yourself. I wish she could meet me now. The me who's not scared of Grandma anymore. I think she knows," Lawrence said softly. "Somehow I think she knows." They sat in comfortable silence. The Christmas tree lights casting familiar shadows. This time last year, they'd been planning their confrontation with Beatrice. This year, they were planning Sophie's book tour and documentary screenings. "Dad," Sophie said, "yeah, thank you for believing me. When I told you about the recordings, you didn't dismiss them or tell me I was being too sensitive. You believed me and helped me fight back. Always, kiddo. Always." The next morning, Christmas Eve arrived for the second time in their new reality. Douglas came over with gifts, thoughtful ones this time, that showed he'd been paying attention to Sophie's interests. They had dinner together, the three of them, sharing stories about Laura and building new traditions. "I have something for you both," Douglas said after dinner. He pulled out a leather portfolio. "These are photos Laura took when she was in college. She was an amazing photographer. Even then, I thought Sophie might like to see her mother's work." Sophie opened the portfolio carefully. Inside were dozens of black and white photographs, street scenes, portraits, architectural details. Each one showed Laura's eye for finding beauty in unexpected places, just as Douglas had said. "These are incredible," Sophie breathed. "Look at the composition, Dad. The way she frames the light." "She learned from the best," Douglas said, looking at Lawrence. "You two were quite the team." "We were," Lawrence agreed. Sophie spent the evening studying the photographs, occasionally taking pictures of them with her own camera. "I'm going to include these in my book," she said. "A chapter about Mom, about how creativity and seeing differently isn't just about autism. It's about finding your own perspective." "She would love that," Douglas said. That night after Douglas left, Sophie and Lawrence sat by the tree again. It had become their spot, their place for important conversations. "Next year, I want to do something different for Christmas," Sophie said. "Like what?" "I want to invite other kids. Kids from the documentary kids who don't have good family situations. I want to make Christmas about community and kindness instead of obligation and cruelty." Lauren smiled. "That's a beautiful idea. It's logical," Sophie corrected, but she was smiling, too. "Christmas should be about building people up, not tearing them down." "Grandma got that backwards." "Yes, she did." Sophie pulled out a wrapped box from behind the tree. "I got you something. Open it." Inside was a framed photograph, one Sophie had taken on last Christmas night. It showed Lawrence sitting in his editing studio. Laura's photo on his desk, his face illuminated by the monitor as he worked on documenting Beatrix's cruelty. The caption in Sophie's precise handwriting read, "The moment I knew we'd win." Lawrence felt tears sting his eyes. "Sophie, it's my favorite picture I've ever taken," she said. "Because it shows what love looks like. You protecting me, fighting for me, being my partner." He pulled her into a hug. And this time, she didn't pull away after 15 seconds. She stayed, her small arms around him. Both of them holding on to each other and the family they'd built from grief and determination. "We did it," Lawrence whispered. "We won." "We did," Sophie agreed. "But Dad, this isn't just about beating Grandma. It's about proving that different isn't defective. That kids like me can fight back. That families like ours, unconventional, neurodivergent, imperfect, are still families. That's the real victory." Lawrence looked at his daughter, this extraordinary child who turned cruelty into advocacy, pain into purpose, emptiness into power. She was right. The real victory wasn't Beatrix's conviction or the documentary success or the book contract. The real victory was Sophie knowing her worth, understanding that she wasn't broken, wasn't defective, wasn't less than anyone else. The real victory was a father and daughter who'd faced down hatred and emerged stronger, kinder, more connected. The real victory was love triumphing over cruelty, truth over lies, resilience over shame. "Merry Christmas." Sophie Lawrence said, "Merry Christmas, Dad." They sat together in the glow of the Christmas tree, surrounded by real presents and genuine love, knowing that no empty box could ever diminish what they'd built together. And somewhere, Lawrence liked to think Laura was smiling.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.